It's that time to say, wake up with us, Africa, as we rise and shine, and we'll be together for the next 3 hours broadcasting as Channel Africa from Johannesburg in South Africa. That's the team of Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro. Let's start you off with our news update at 6 o'clock Central African time. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. Specialist crime investigator in South Africa, Mike Boyes, has rejected social media claims that the criminal case against the son of Zimbabwe's late President Robert Mugabe might be thrown out of court for lack of evidence. This is due to a missing firearm allegedly used in the shooting incident. Palamine Mugabe and his co-accused Tobias Matonodze were arrested following the shooting of an employee of the Mugabe family in the north of Johannesburg last week. Boyes gives his opinion on the matter.
There is physical evidence of a shot, there is witnesses, and this is a gun wound, and he's critically in hospital. These are all facts and information that will be presented to the court. There is no other way this person is in the situation that he finds himself other than being shot by a gun. But the fact remains that those who don't come forward with a gun is in bigger trouble. If victim lies and does not give his full cooperation, he also is in trouble. This case cannot fall away. Nobody can withdraw this case, and this case has to be prosecuted by the state.
The UN Security Council has announced new sanctions on 4 leaders of Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces over atrocities committed in the western city of Al-Fashir. The capture of the city in October was one of the most brutal chapters of the civil war. The BBC's Barbara Platt-Asher.
The UN said Abdulrahim Dagalo had overseen operations on the day the RSF took over Al-Fashir, citing atrocities carried out by his forces, including mass killings and ethnically targeted executions. It also sanctioned a commander known as Abu Lulu, who earned the nickname Butcher of Al-Fashir because of graphic videos he posted that showed him smiling while killing unarmed civilians. This is now the 4th time General Dagalo has been sanctioned, following earlier designations by the US, the UK and the European Union. The other 3 commanders have also already been sanctioned by the US and Britain.
The city of Cape Town in South Africa has issued an early drought caution, saying the metro's water supply is currently sitting at 20% less than this time last year. The city says it will assess the situation further during the highest rainfall month from June to August before considering water restrictions. The city's member of Water and Sanitation, Dr. Zahid Badruddin, has called for behavioral change in water by the city's residents. He addressed the media in Cape Town.
So at the moment, our dam levels are at about 57%. We have seen week on week almost a 2% decrease in the volume of water in our dams. We know that about 70% of water that is being used in our city at this moment takes place in our homes, with the fear, unfortunately, that our dam levels may continue to decline on the background of us already estimating that the rains may come later in the year, further worsening the risk of potential restrictions in about November, if not earlier.
The Committee to Protect Journalists says a record 129 media workers were killed worldwide last year. This is the highest number since the CPJ began compiling figures in 1992. The organization attributed more than 2/3 of the deaths to Israeli fires, the vast majority Palestinians reporting from Gaza. And lastly, police in Sri Lanka have arrested the former intelligence chief in connection with deadly Easter Sunday bombings in 2019. 279 people died in the bombings, which targeted 3 churches and 3 hotels. The BBC's Arunade Mukherjee.
Police said that retired Major General Suresh Saleh was detained at dawn in a suburb of the capital, Colombo, on suspicion of conspiracy and aiding and abetting the suicide attacks. Officials blamed the bombings on a local jihadist group, but General Saleh later faced accusations, which he denied, that he had allowed them to go ahead to influence upcoming elections in favor of Gotabaya Rajapakse. Mr. Rajapakse won by a landslide after promising to crack down on Islamist extremism. After becoming president, he promoted General Saleh to head of the State Intelligence Service.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news, the Sawa, South Africa will face Panama in Durban and Cape Town in 2 friendly matches, while India must win the T20 World Cup Super 8 match clash with Zimbabwe in Chennai today. Details, 6:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Clock, Central African time. Well, it is 6 minutes past 6 exactly. And welcome to it. This is Rise and Shine, and we're broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. From the African perspective, we bring you news and current affairs as Rise and Shine. And our channel is Channel Africa. Thank you so much for tuning in, and a very good morning to you from wherever you are joining us. You can connect with us on channelafrica.co.za, on the SABC Plus app via mobile phone. You can also find us on DSTV Audio Bouquet, channel number 802. And we are live streaming on YouTube at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. My name is Asanda, Beda, and I'm with my co-pilot, Mr. Peter Ndoro.
In Zimbabwe, we say Mangwanani.
Mangwanani.
Yes, which means good morning. Yes. Happy Thursday.
Happy 5 to Friday.
Yeah, there's something very positive about Thursdays, especially a day before payday, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, especially
we love
today. We love today's Thursday more than any other.
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking at an interesting story. Israel's President Isaac Herzog has arrived in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, on a state visit this week to strengthen bilateral ties between Israel and Ethiopia. And this comes days after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proposed forging a network of what he calls allied nations, including the Middle East and Africa, to stand against what he called radical adversaries. No questions and trying to figure out who's on that list of Netanyahu's of radical adversaries. So it is interesting that there are some African countries that are very pro-Israel and others that are not pro-Israel. And historically, Ethiopia and Israel do have relations. There's the famous Ethiopian Jews that live in Israel as we speak. So we'll be unpacking that, what it all means for the continent and also the Middle East in general.
And the Human Rights Watch group has its eyes on Rwanda, and this is 6 years after the death of Rwandan gospel singer and peace advocate Kizito Mihigo in police custody. Questions have persisted over accountability and freedom of expression in Rwanda. While authorities say Mihigo took his own life, human rights groups insist that there's been no credible independent investigation into his death. So now Human Rights Watch wants answers, and that story and more will be coming up on this first hour of Africa Rise and Shine.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Kiongozi wa chama kikuu cha upinzani nchini Tanzania Tundu Lissu anayekabiliwa na kesi ya uhaini anasema hajala chakula licha ya kesi inayomkabili awali kuahirishwa. Pengine haya malalamiko yana mashiko ya namna yoyote?
Kama yana mashiko ama hayana ni jambo tofauti, kwa sababu yeye muda uliotolewa mchana ni kwa ajili ya kwenda kula. Nakumbuka kwamba Lissu ni mahabusu, sio mfungwa. Japokuwa sijajua taratibu za magereza zinakuaje wanapokuwa na wafungwa na mahabusu, lakini mahabusu wanapelekwa chakula na ndugu zao kutoka nje.
Na kama tunavyofahamu, kesi hii ikiwa inaendelea, imeelezwa kwamba itakuwa inaendelea kusikilizwa mfululizo ili kuweza kuendelea na kuweza kuimaliza kwa haraka. Yeye mwenyewe ndio ambaye anajitetea, Tundu Lissu. Pengine wana namna ya wao kutaka kuleta hukumu ya haraka, au haya ni maelezo ya awali?
Hapana, ni kesi inaendelea na wanasikiliza mashahidi. Kwa hiyo lazima itapelekwa haraka, kwa sababu pia limekuwa ni ombi la mshtakiwa mwenyewe anayejitetea, Tundu Lissu.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
10 minutes past 6 Central African Time, and that means it's time for our daily Africa Roundup. And each morning, just after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you a concise update on the key developments shaping the continent and the world over the past 24 hours, with insights from our team of journalists, analysts, and of course, voices of the newsmakers themselves, placing the day's biggest stories into context for you, helping you stay informed, connected, and prepared for the news day ahead. Let's begin with this story where dozens of people have crossed from the Democratic Republic of Congo into neighboring Burundi this week after authorities reopened the main border post between Uvira and Gatumba. The crossing had been shut for more than 2 months due to ongoing fighting in eastern Congo, which has displaced thousands. David Doyle picks up the story.
Riziki Faraha says she fled violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo to Burundi with 4 children. She's now returning with 3. One child died, she said, during a period of displacement in which her family struggled to find work and could not afford medical care. Other returnees told similar stories of hardship in exile and expressed their relief to be heading home. The Kavimvira border was shut in December after Rwanda-backed M23 rebels advanced towards Uvira, prompting thousands to flee across the frontier. That was at the end of a year in which the rebels made rapid advances in eastern Congo, including seizing the region's 2 largest cities. The reopening comes after Congolese forces re-established control of Uvira in January. The closure had cut off a key economic route. It's hoped that a renewed flow of people and trade could help restore daily life in the conflict-hit region.
In Senegal, Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko has called for tougher penalties against same-sex relations. A proposed draft law would double the maximum prison sentence from 5 to 10 years. Rachel Graham reports.
Under the draft law, the maximum prison sentence, rising from 5 to 10 years, would be applied to any act committed with a person under the age of 21. Those found guilty could also face fines ranging from the equivalent of $3,500 to almost $18,000. Anyone considered to be financing or supporting the promotion of LGBT practices could also face penalties, Sonko told lawmakers. He blamed the West for championing LGBT rights in Senegal as he called on all parties to support the law.
Those in the opposition who are stirring things up will go to their Western masters and say, look how bad they are. They are repressing homosexuals, which we didn't want to do. They are doing it. They will use this politically with Westerners and with lobbies. They don't even believe what they're saying.
Meanwhile, violent unrest at Senegal's main university is piling pressure on Prime Minister Sonko's young, populist-led administration. One student has died. More than 100 people have been arrested, and the Dakar campus has remained closed for weeks now.
Violent clashes with law enforcement erupted at Cheikh Anta Diop University in early February after students protested over what they said was unpaid financial aid. Students reported police storming into dormitories, beating them with batons and shields. Communications student Babacar Diouf says he was beaten by different groups of police and was left with hand and eye injuries.
A group of police officers beat me to the point where I could no longer sit or lie down.
Authorities said force was necessary to protect public property, alleging some students planned to ransack a campus restaurant. The unrest shows a growing rift between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his young backers, who had helped propel him and Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko to power in 2024.
When Malawi's Lake Chilwa dried up over 2 years ago, people began walking and even cycling across its dry bed to reach Chisi Island. Fishing communities around the country's second largest lake suddenly lost their main source of food and income. Vanessa Chan reports.
Climate change has intensified drought, causing the lake to disappear more frequently. When the rains returned this season, fishermen like Madsen James Peter said their catches remained low.
The fishing business is no longer promising. The size of the fish caught in this lake today is small compared to what we used to catch way back. This is because the lake is drying up more often.
The shallow Lake Chilwa has always fluctuated with the seasons, but climate change is worsening drought cycles, making the lake unpredictable. The lake's decline has ripple effects beyond fishing. When Chilwa dries up, it leaves exposed mudflats that farmers quickly convert into rice fields. But those gains vanish when the water returns, erasing cultivated land and leaving communities torn between farming, fishing, and survival.
And that's how we conclude this Thursday's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow. It comes after the 6 a.m. news here on Rise and Shine.
The safety and well-being of learners is a shared social responsibility. Parents and guardians play a critical role in ensuring safe, reliable, and lawful scholar transport. Parents are therefore urged to take responsibility for the following. Parents should ensure that learners are on time and ready for collection to prevent unsafe driving practices such as rushing, unscheduled stops, or overloading. By working together, parents, operators, and authorities can protect learners and build a culture of safety on our roads. Issued by the National Department of Transport.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Historia msikilizaji ya Valentine Day au siku ya wapendanao ilianzia katika nyakati za kale za dola la Roma. Watafiti wengi wa historia wanaamini kuwa siku hii inahusishwa na sherehe za kipagani zilizokuwa zikifanyika kila mwaka katikati ya mwezi Februari. Msikilizaji, sherehe hizo zilijulikana kama Lupercalia na zilifanyika kuadhimisha uzazi, upendo na mwanzo wa majira ya kuchipua.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Some of the parties fighting the implementation of the universal health coverage known as the National Health Insurance, or NHI, in South Africa have welcomed the announcement by President Cyril Ramaphosa to delay the proclamation of any sections of the National Health Insurance Act pending a ruling by the Constitutional Court. This follows litigations which were brought forward by various parties against Ramaphosa and country's Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Among those was AfriForum Group, who seeks to challenge the constitutionality of the NHI Act. Sisi Sikhalo has more on this story.
This week, in a surprise move by the presidency in South Africa, a statement was released announcing that they're delaying the proclamation of any sections of the National Health Insurance Act until the Constitutional Court has handed down its judgments in May. They said this was necessitated by legal action against the country's President Cyril Ramaphosa and Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. The cases relate to the public participation process that led to the adoption of the NHI bill by Parliament. Spokesperson to the President, Vincent Magwenya, however, says this does not mean that the government is abandoning the National Health Insurance.
The Department of Health will continue in its constitutional responsibility to strengthen the health system and improve the quality of care. The department has also indicated that preparatory work has been ongoing, such as the improvement of health services, before any sections of the NHI Act are ready for commencement. The undertaking by the President will not affect the timetable for the implementation of the NHI.
Rights group AfriForum is the latest to announce its litigation against the controversial National Health Insurance. On Wednesday, AfriForum served summons to the president and 4 other defendants as part of the organization's legal action to challenge the constitutionality of the NHI Act. There are close to 10 other litigants against the NHI. AfriForum spokesperson for health is Louis Boshoff.
If there are questions about the feasibility of a system, it is obvious that the government cannot first implement it and then give the court the opportunity to assess whether it is feasible. Therefore, this undertaking by the President should have taken place a long time ago. AfriForum will continue its court action against NHI without interruption.
Another organization that also took the Ministry of Health to court is the South African Medical Association. The organization says it also welcomes a pause in the implementation of the National Health Insurance. Chairperson of the association, Dr. Mvuyisi Nzukwa, explains.
Our High Court challenge remains intact and will resume depending on the Constitutional Court's decision. If the Constitutional Court upholds the challenges, the NHI process may need reformulation, and if dismissed, litigation will proceed. This development underscores a core principle that far-reaching health system reform must comply strictly with constitutional requirements, namely proper public participation, legality, and rational policymaking. SAMA remains committed to defending these values for the future of healthcare in South Africa.
Meanwhile, Professor Alex van der Heever from Wits University School of Governance says there's an agreement in place between the litigators and government that neither of the two will proceed until the court date. Van der Heever explains what that entails.
There's 2 constitutional court cases, but the one which deals with procedure and one which deals with whether or not the president lawfully assented to the act. And what they've agreed is that they will both hold back on litigation on the one side, and that government will hold back on promulgating until the constitutional court cases are concluded. And what then happened was Solidarity, one of the parties to the litigation, then had that agreement reduced to a court order, which essentially means that the government, if it did promulgate or did anything, it would be in contravention, it would be in contempt of court. So essentially there's a court decision and an agreement that nobody will proceed.
The Constitutional Court case will be heard from the 5th to the 7th of May this year. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The United Nations Security Council convened on Tuesday as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine entered its 5th year, with member states renewing urgent calls for an immediate, full and unconditional ceasefire. Western delegations pressed for sustained diplomatic economic pressure on Russia, citing expanded sanctions and continued military and humanitarian assistance for Kyiv. Addressing the chamber, Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Beda accused Moscow of waging an imperial neo-colonial war. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe filed this report.
In commemorating 4 years after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine on Tuesday, the UN Security Council marked the day with high-level debate and renewed calls to end the war, including in the General Assembly, which passed a resolution reaffirming its strong commitment to the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The debate underscored mounting humanitarian costs, intensifying diplomacy, and the gap between calls for peace and realities on the battlefield, as civilians' infrastructure and energy system remain under attack. While presenting a peace resolution titled Support for Lasting Peace in Ukraine, Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Mariana Beda delivered a forceful condemnation of Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine.
Russia's war of aggression has shattered peace in Europe and around the globe and struck at the very core of the UN Charter and the fundamental principles of international law, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-use of force. Russia's war of aggression is imperial and neo-colonial in its nature. What Russia wants to do, what Kremlin wants to do, is to divide the world into spheres of influence and to make Ukraine as a satellite. Russia will not succeed. Russia miscalculated gravely in 2014 when it started its aggression against Ukraine, thinking that Ukraine would collapse. Russia miscalculated gravely in 2022 when it started its full-scale invasion, thinking that Ukraine would collapse. And Russia miscalculates gravely now, in February 2026, thinking that it is betting on time and Ukraine would collapse. Ukraine resists and defends itself, and we're not alone. I'm grateful to each and every member state present in this hall for your outstanding support.
Beda said the war does not serve Ukraine's interests, stressing that the country remains committed to pursuing peace.
Madam President, Ukraine did not choose this war. Ukraine chooses peace. Ukraine chooses life. Ukraine chooses independence and freedom. If Ukraine were to stop fighting, we would lose our state, our people, and our freedom. Ukraine seeks peace. We want peace more than anyone, but not peace at any cost, not peace at any price, not peace under the disguise of capitulation or surrender. It will not happen. Ukraine will not surrender. We will never accept the occupation of our territories or our people. We will never accept awarding aggressor for its aggression, and we will never accept impunity for crimes committed against Ukrainians for all these 12 years.
Responding to the accusations, Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN, Anna Estigeva, rejected Ukraine's peace proposal, arguing that an immediate ceasefire would merely allow Ukraine to regroup and rearm rather than address what Russia called the root causes of the conflict.
Today, you have been presented with yet another text that essentially continues the same line. The draft resolution is titled Support for Lasting Peace in Ukraine, but its content focuses primarily on the demand for an immediate and complete cessation of hostilities. A ceasefire in itself can be an important element of a settlement, but it is not an end in itself. History knows many examples when a hasty truce that did not address the root causes of the conflict turned into just a pause before a new round of violence. It is clear that Kiev, facing serious difficulties on the front line, as well as dwindling support from its Western sponsors, is primarily interested in a pause so that it can regroup and rearm.
She said trilateral talks are underway in Abu Dhabi and Geneva, urging restraint and respect for diplomacy while crediting the efforts of Donald Trump's administration to broker a compromise.
Trilateral negotiations are presently underway between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. Talks are being held in Abu Dhabi and Geneva. The delegations are working under challenging conditions, fully aware of their historical responsibility for the outcome. This is a moment that calls for quiet, restraint, and respect for the negotiation process. Instead, we are witnessing blatant disregard for the diplomatic efforts of those countries who are investing political capital into the settlement, primarily the United States, as well as the personal efforts of President Donald Trump's administration aimed at finding a compromise. If the true goal is really peace, then actions must corroborate words rather than contradict them.
Speaking on behalf of South Africa, Andries Oosthuizen said the crisis is deeply regrettable and might have been averted through diplomatic channels.
It is regrettable that we are meeting on the 4th anniversary of a war that could have been resolved diplomatically rather than through a protracted conflict. This conflict led to wanton destruction and the death of many in Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and affected the security of the wider European region. The human and negative economic impact and tension arising from the conflict has affected all of us, including African countries.
He reaffirmed South Africa's support for protecting children on all sides of the war and called for a UN-centered negotiated settlement grounded in international law.
South Africa also reiterates its continued support for the protection of children on all sides and their inviolable right to grow up in peace in a social context that respects their identity and celebrates their humanity. President, now more than ever, at this inflection point in the stability of the global order, there is a need for a peaceful and negotiated resolution of this and other persistent conflicts, with the UN at the center, in line with a rules-based order, with due respect for international law.
The resolution was adopted by 107 votes in favor, 12 against, and 51 abstentions. Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
So, 629. So I'm going to take you back to 1885. And Asanda, this conference changed the whole game for us.
Conferences way back then.
Yes, the Berlin Conference, also known as the Congo Conference, concluded on this day in 1885. And we're still suffering the consequences. These people, these Europeans, took rulers and drew lines across Africa and said, I'll take this bit, you'll take that bit, okay, I'll take that bit. And they didn't care who was on the ground. The natural aggregation of people. So you'll have houses in Nigeria, houses in Niger. They drew a line in line with the longitude, the line of longitude, and from tomorrow, when now you're French speaking, and south, your cousins are English speaking. And that's what they did to us. And that all happened in 1885, and that conference concluded. And we're suffering to this day with these fictitious borders that have separated us, that mean nothing. And now we hate each other, and yet we're cousins. Hey, Kimachil.
6:30 Central African time it is. Let's get our news headlines, and here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Specialist crime investigator Mike Boyes has rejected social media claims that the criminal case against Robert Mugabe's son, Balamain Mugabe, and his co-accused might be thrown out of court for lack of evidence. The former state attorney and lawyers for several accused in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases, Jan Wagner in South Africa, is said to be the last person in possession of dockets related to some African National Congress leaders' dockets. This was revealed by the former SAPS detective Andrew Leaks at the GRC cases inquiry in Newtown, Johannesburg. And a BBC investigation has revealed that Nepal's top police officer gave the order allowing the use of live fire during last year's Gen Z protests in the capital, Kathmandu. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right.
Now it's yes.
So you,
Over you. Over to you, I forgot.
It's time to take a first look at what's happening in the world of sport. And at the sports desk today, we say good morning to Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. A very good morning indeed from the sports desk. So Bafana, that's of course South Africa, will host Panama in 2 international friendly matches next month as part of their preparations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup tournament. Now, the first match is set for Durban's Moses Mabhida Stadium. That's on the 27th of March in the country's KwaZulu-Natal province, before the teams will meet again at the Cape Town Stadium on the 31st of March in the Western Cape province for the second friendly match. Now, the head coach, Hugo Bruce, views the fixtures as vital to his build-up program ahead of the global showpiece that is co-hosted by the USA, Canada, as well as Mexico. It will also mark Bafana's return to Durban for the very first time since their goalless draw with Zimbabwe in October of last year, a qualifier that preceded their emphatic 3-0 victory over Rwanda to secure a World Cup qualification. Well, further afield now, Vinicius Jr. struck the winner. This as Real Madrid sealed their place in the Champions League last 16 with a 2-1 victory over Benfica at the Santiago Bernabeu. Now, the Brazilian forward, supported by a No to Racism banner from home fans after recent controversy and drove home a clinical finish with about 10 minutes remaining to wrap up a 3-1 aggregate success. Despite missing the injured Kylian Mbappe, Madrid held firm with Vinicius continuing his rich vein of form, 6 goals and 5 games to send Los Blancos through to face either Manchester City or Sporting Lisbon in the next round. Meanwhile, in another match, Atalanta produced one of the greatest Champions League comebacks, overturning a 2-0 first leg deficit to beat Borussia Dortmund 4-1 in Bergamo and reach the last 16. They will now face either Arsenal or Bayern Munich in the next round of the UEFA Champions League. On to cricket news. Defending champions India will face a must-win T20 World Cup Super 8 clash against Zimbabwe in Chennai today, with their faltering opening combination under scrutiny. So wicketkeeper batter Sanju Samson is being considered as a potential option at the top of the order after Ishbhai Sharma's slump, which includes 3 consecutive ducks. Now, India's campaign took a heavy blow with a 76-run defeat to South Africa in their opening Super 8's match over the weekend, leaving them needing victories in their remaining fixtures to keep semi-final hopes alive. Now, New Zealand boosted their T20 World Cup semi-final hopes with a commanding 61-run victory over the co-host Sri Lanka in Colombo yesterday, knocking the island nation out of the tournament. So, chasing 169 runs for a victory, Sri Lanka faltered at 107 for 8. This as the Black Caps tightened their grip on qualification. Victory over England on Friday would then see New Zealand top the Super 8's group and then progress alongside Harry Brooks' side. Meanwhile, South African batter Tristan Stubbs expects the West Indies to bring a similar challenge to the way they faced the co-host India when the two teams meet in their second Super 8's match at the T20 World Cup today. So the two teams will meet at the Narendra Modi Stadium in the city of Ahmedabad, with action getting underway at 11:30 a.m. Central African times. Both teams, by the way, are undefeated at this year's tournament so far.
We even saw in the series now they're posting massive scores, and all the batters are in really good form. So they bring that challenge with a bowling attack that's doing really well. So I think completely it's different to India, but I suppose in a way it's a similar challenge, like a really good batting lineup who can score that big score if you're not on it, and a bowling attack that then can do a good job at defending. So.
All right, so that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Coming up on Rise and Shine, the city of Cape Town in South Africa is today holding a public land auction that has drawn strong opposition from a coalition of community organizations and indigenous groups. So the coalition says the sale threatens sacred and heritage sites. It also exacerbates historic land dispossession, and it prioritizes private developers over housing and community needs. We'll be getting word from chairperson of the Southern African Aboriginal Congress. They are one of those community organizations that feel like indigenous groups are not being consulted properly here. And just to clarify, the Aboriginal people are also those who inhabit or are existing in the land from the earliest times, from pre-colonialism. So we're not necessarily talking about Australians here, the Aborigines from there. That story is coming up, and stay tuned for that.
Stella Longwe pamalonje
ndiyetu apa tindikatswiri oyimba wa dziko la Mozambique ameneyu amene ali Rikabana ndatiuzeni kuti mayimba chamba chanji komanso dzina lanu lenileni kuoneka ngati dzina limeneli ndilijatu atapa stage. Dzina lanu kwenikweni ndi ndani komanso mayimba chamba chanji?
Ineyo dzina langa lenileni ndine Ricardo Musa Rabana
chamba chimene ndimayimba ine ndimanganji ndimakonda kwambiri ma tradition zimenezo ndi nyimbo zathu chifukwa kwathu kunoko tili ndi madansi osiyanasiyana a chimizi nde ineyo poti ndi mnyamata wa chimizi nde ndimakondanso nyimbo za chimizi.
Ndinu a chimizi nde makondanso nyimbo za chimizi mapanganso za chimizi ayi zosangalatsa kuti mwanena poyera kuti ndinu a chimizi anthu amazibisa anthu amafuna kukhala ndithu achitauni koma chikhalidwe tu chilibe chitauni alese ndi chikhalidwe chake alese ndi zimene amakonda.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business from the African perspective for the first time on this 26th of February, this Thursday. We say good morning to Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning and a very good morning to our listeners. Our top story this morning, South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has held back from announcing a fiscal anchor as markets had anticipated. Presenting his 2026 national budget, Godongwana says consultations on the matter are continuing. Ahead of the tabling of the budget, the International Monetary Fund had encouraged the government to adopt a fiscal rule to curb debt. The IMF has warned that the previous spending ceilings introduced in 2012 had failed to stop debt from rising. The IMF is instead calling for stricter binding measures. Godongwana says more will be announced at the medium-term budget policy statement in October. The minister presented his 2026 national budget in Cape Town.
We aim to introduce a proposal of a principle-based fiscal anchor in the medium-term budget policy statement after thorough consultation in Cabinet, Parliament, and with the public. Just as inflation targeting provided clarity and credibility to monetary policy, the fiscal anchor aims to entrench fiscal credibility.
Meanwhile, South Africa's National Treasury is making headway in narrowing the budget deficit to 4.5% of GDP for 2025-26. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says this is an improvement from the 4.8% that was estimated in the 2025 budget. Godongwana tabled his 2026 budget against a more favorable backdrop, with public finances reaching a turning point, stabilizing for the first time in 17 years. The minister says debt to GDP is set to stabilize at 78.9% in 2025-26 and then trend lower from then on.
This slightly higher debt peak this year reflects weaker nominal GDP growth and our decision to take advantage of strong investor demand in domestic and global markets by increasing our issuance in 25-26. The main budget primary surplus for 25-26 reaches 0.9% of GDP.
The Bank of Korea's 7-member Monetary Policy Board voted to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 2.5% today, signaling that policy would stay unchanged for the next 6 months as a chip boom in exports and steady inflation allow policymakers more time to assess financial stability risks. The central bank also raised this year's rate forecast to 2% from 1.8% previously. The central bank says it sees Asia's fourth largest economy growing significantly faster this year than in 2025, helped by a chip boom led by Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. And now taking a look at the indicators this morning. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira, 351. In Botswana, it's 13 pula and 3. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 7, and in Zambia it's 18 kwacha 81 this morning. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 riyals 16, Russia 76 rubles 33, in India it's 90 rupees 92, China 6 yuan 89, and South Africa $1 is trading at 15 rand 89 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 75 to the British pound and 84 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,182 per ounce, platinum $2,271 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $70.87 a barrel. That's the business news at this hour. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
6:44 Central African Time. We take a look at this story now. Tourism leaders say stronger collaboration, improved infrastructure and better connectivity are essential to unlocking Africa's tourism potential. These issues are in focus as Meetings Africa 2026 wraps up today in Johannesburg, South Africa, where industry stakeholders have gathered to discuss the future of travel on the continent. Channel Africa's Mabange reports.
After days of deal-making, exhibitions and networking, the final discussions at Meetings Africa are focusing on one big question: how Africa can work together to grow its tourism market. Industry leaders say the continent has huge potential, but unlocking it will require cooperation between countries, better transport links, and policies that make travel easier. Managing Director of MSC Cruises South Africa, Ross Falk, highlighted the opportunity for Africa to grow its cruise tourism sector.
4 million people are transported on cruise vessels around the world annually, but 60% of that's out of America. And they've been the major proponent of cruise industries for a very, very long time. If you succeed in America, you succeed in cruising. And I think it's now time to look at what they've done effectively well and bring that to an African connectivity. And I think that we are very much in a sunrise kind of environment within Africa and South Africa in particular, but we have a long way to go in relation to what we need to go and look at doing. And the connectivity is one of those fundamental issues that we have to look at.
Falk says collaboration between African countries will be key if the continent wants to tap into the global cruise market.
So we've got to provide a holistic solution to visas, free transport, travel, integrated security policies, because you're touching multiple countries. I think a continent of 1.1 billion people, if 18 million of Americans travel on cruises, what can we do with 30% more population in Africa if we have the right platform and the right collaboration to grow the industry within Africa, but South Africa in particular?
The conversation also turned to the broader challenge of making travel across Africa easier and more accessible. Chifiwa Chibengwa, CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, says improving infrastructure is essential if the continent wants to grow intra-African travel.
Within the African context, there's a lot of talk about we need to collaborate. There's a lot of talk about things that we need to do to grow the economy, whether it's a tourism economy or economy in general. There's a lot of discussions that we have around that. If we really want to drive the growth of intra-Africa travel, we need to invest in infrastructure. That is the problem. It can't be that you can't dock ships across many ports here in South Africa or across many other areas of the African continent. We need to invest in that infrastructure if we want to attract the cruising industry, and also if we want our own people to get into cruising.
Chivengwa says while collaboration is often discussed, real progress will depend on governments and the private sector working together.
Collaboration within the African context, it's usually failed, not by private sector, it failed by the other party, which is the public sector. Because we talk about things that we want to do, we've got these grand ideas that never see the light of the day. So if we really want to build up, there are many things that we need to do from aviation point of view, connecting many different African countries, to building railway networks, to making sure our ports are ready for passengers and goods, and many other things.
As Meetings Africa comes to an end, industry players say the conversations must now translate into action if the continent is to fully unlock the potential of its tourism sector. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The city of Cape Town in South Africa is proceeding with a public auction of municipal land, a move that sparked strong opposition from indigenous groups, housing activists and human rights activists. That's a story that we're going to be taking a look at in a short while and find out why it's so sensitive and contentious. That's coming up.
Across Africa, communities rise with the promise of clean water and clean sanitation. The African Union's 2026 theme calls us to action.
It's about mobilizing real commitments, securing climate-resilient water and sanitation projects, and ensuring that water becomes a driver of sustainable development and prosperity across the continent.
A landmark moment, not only for Africa, but for the global movement for access to safe water for all.
Assuring sustainable water availability for every home, every village, every nation. This is the Africa we want.
Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Historia ya msikilizaji ya Valentine Day au siku ya wapendanao ilianzia katika nyakati za kale za dola la Roma. Watafiti wengi wa historia wanaamini kuwa siku hii inahusishwa na sherehe za kipagani zilizokuwa zikifanyika kila mwaka katikati ya mwezi Februari. Msikilizaji, sherehe hizo zilijulikana kama Lupercalia na zilifanyika kuadhimisha uzazi, upendo na mwanzo wa majira ya kuchipua.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The city of Cape Town in South Africa is proceeding with a public auction of municipal land. And this is a move that's sparked strong opposition from indigenous groups, housing activists and human rights bodies. Critics argue that the sale risks deepening historic land dispossession, threatens sites of cultural and spiritual significance, and prioritizes private development over urgent housing needs in one of the world's most unequal societies. The South African Human Rights Commission has also called for the process to be reconsidered. We're now joined by Sores Flores, who's the chairperson of the Southern African Aboriginal Congress, whose organization is part of a coalition that's challenging this auction. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning to you and your listeners, and thank you for having me.
For many of our listeners across the continent who are not very familiar with the local context, talk to us a little bit about why this land being auctioned has much more significance than just property up for sale.
Good morning. Thank you again, and thank you for the question. Yes, the land that's for sale is just not residential or industrial land. They are heritage sites, and they are also cultural and historic sites, if you want to put it that, for us and the people of Cape Town. And those are now going under the hammer, and that is very significant for us.
Tell us a little bit of that history that goes with a lot of the land that's being auctioned.
Well, I think the main one that stands out there is, amongst others, the Good Hope Center, but then there's also a couple of environmental heritage sites. But the Good Hope Center itself has been part of Cape Town, and as we say, Cape Town culture, or Cape Townian visible and physical culture. So most of the people growing up for the last 5 decades, 6 decades in Cape Town, they know the center. It's become an iconic landmark, and it surely got a lot of people hot under the collar, especially us, when it went up for sale, and we saw that it's one of the pieces that is up for sale.
The city of Cape Town says that, look, these sales are part of normal urban development and economic growth. Why do you believe that this process prioritizes private developers over housing and community needs?
The starting point here, it's not the first time it happens, number one, and it's a classic tale of the two cities. everyone talks about Cape Town, or South Africa rather, by being one of the most unequal countries in the world when it comes to rich and poor. But in Cape Town, it is very much highlighted, and that comes from the old design of the cities where our people have been removed from really their ancestral land and where they grew, and they were moved out of the city. And they are now living on the outskirts with no transport into town and no access to these sites. And now the sites is going under the hammer, but the public participations and the things that should happen has not happened. So, number one, it's for sale without the participation of the people. And then there's the affordability, because for everyone that's going to buy it, it's not going to be the poorest of the poor or the indigenous people who's been dispossessed of the land before. It's going to be people with lots of money, and that has priced us out of actually buying back land that really belongs to us in the first place. That's a starting point, but I think the main contention here is that it's done without public participation processes and that it is going into private hands, and that is one of the big problems for us.
So what would you like to see happening? Let's say they did the consultation process. What would you prefer happens to this land?
Well, there's a lot of comments at the moment, and, I personally have not said this must happen to the land, but the general feel is the public places should stay public places if we're not only talking about the one place, but the land itself. We're not against development. We are not against land being and everyone being included in it, but the processes have to be followed, because we were forced ultimately to bring legal action. As you said, the Human Rights Commission also stepped in, which is quite a relief for us. But what we like to see happen is proper processes followed, everyone participate in decision making, that there's access to justice for everyone, but that there's free, prior and consent as required from the indigenous people of what happens to our land in Cape Town.
You know, they talk about gentrification quite a bit, and we've been seeing it in other parts of the world, the UK, where I know quite well. Is this what you're seeing in Cape Town, where you get to a point where actually foreigners start to own more and more land in South Africa? Because when you take the US dollar and you take the pound converted to rands, they're buying properties for cheap in terms of what they would be paying back home.
Absolutely. It is very obviously visible. And it's not just people with money or immigrants and migrants with money, because we've got a situation with immigrants and migrants, and the one has the money and the other one services the money. And the problem we see is we're losing our land to both. So the one comes and buys it with a lot of money, and what comes shortly after is people that needs to work for the foreign nationals. And the people that come and work for these guys are also foreign nationals, and then the people needs land. And then they put them in our pockets of land, change the name of our place, and obviously get serviced in exchange for voting. That is what's happening, but it's very obvious. We can see it everywhere. So the places get built, the high-rises go up, and then not far from it, the shacks go up to support what has just happened.
You have taken some legal action so far. Has that yielded any fruit, or is that still ongoing?
There's been several. We've launched our legal action on the 12th of February 2026, and it was dismissed on a technical challenge. And the technical challenge is that we do not have an advocate, because we feel that it's, first of all, very unfortunate that groups of interest like us have to go to this extremes to try and stop it, and that no political parties, no NGOs, and no other organizations took legal action up until that time. Yes, we are very happy there's a lot of awareness around it now and everyone is going. But the fact that justice has cost so much money that the poorest of the poor had to bring it in front of these courts to get their attention, welcomed attention, is very sad. But yes, there was no other action to take, legal action, and now there's a few other options with commissions and political parties and civil society in general, just having a look at it.
All right, so this auction might still go ahead today at this stage?
As far as we believe it is, they have moved the auction from a live auction at the DHL Stadium to an online auction. Maybe in fear for further protests or actions like that. But we have written to, as the coalition, to the Human Rights Commission to urge them to act on their media release that should the city go forward, that they in fact will bring legal action. We've also wrote to some ministers in the government department, and one of the coalition groups fired up to the presidency themselves. So, yes, there's a lot of people looking at it, and the auction, as far as we are concerned, is going ahead today.
All right, we wish you the best and hopefully that sanity prevails. Soares, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for yours. Have a great day.
That was Soares Flores, chairperson of the Southern African Aboriginal Congress, whose organisation is part of a coalition opposing the sale of what they see as important sacred and heritage sites in the city of Cape Town.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
It's time now to enter the second hour of Rise and Shine. Good morning if you've just joined us. It's 7 o'clock Central African time. My name is Asanda Beda. I'm with Peter Ndoro. We'll let you know what's coming up in a bit. Let's start you off with our news update. Here's Onel Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Specialist crime investigator in South Africa, Mike Boyes, has rejected social media claims that the criminal case against the son of Zimbabwe's late President Robert Mugabe might be thrown out of court for lack of evidence. This is due to a missing firearm allegedly used in the shooting incident. Palamine Mugabe and his co-accused Tobias Matohodze were arrested following the shooting of an employee of the Mugabe family in the north of Johannesburg last week. Boyes gives his opinion on the matter.
There is physical evidence of a shot, there is witnesses, and this is a gun wound and he's critically in hospital. These are all facts and information that will be presented to the court. There is no other way this person is in the situation that he finds himself other than being shot by a gun. But the fact remains that those who don't come forward with a gun is in bigger trouble. If victim lies and does not give his full cooperation, he also is in trouble. This case cannot fall away. Nobody can withdraw this case, and this case has to be prosecuted by the state.
The UN Security Council has announced new sanctions on 4 leaders of Sudan's paramilitary rapid support forces of atrocities committed in the western city of Al Fashir. The capture of the city in October was one of the most brutal chapters of the civil war. The BBC's Barbara Platt-Asher.
The UN said Abdulrahim Dagalo had overseen operations on the day the RSF took over Al Fashir, citing atrocities carried out by his forces, including mass killings and ethnically targeted executions. It also sanctioned a commander known as Abu Lulu, who earned the nickname Butcher of Al Fashir because of graphic videos he posted that showed him smiling while killing unarmed civilians. This is now the 4th time General Dagalo has been sanctioned, following earlier designations by the US, the UK and the European Union. The other 3 commanders have also already been sanctioned by the US and Britain.
South Africa's Parliament's ad hoc committee in Cape Town says that it is looking into concerns of national security as it meets again today with 2 returning witnesses. The committee is probing allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption, and political interference in the justice system of the country. Today, private forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan will return to the committee. He appeared earlier this month, but due to his severe back pain, his questioning was cut short. The former acting National Police Commissioner Khomotso Phahlane is finalizing his testimony before the committee. He appeared in January this year, but due to time constraints, the committee couldn't finalize its questioning. The former state attorney and lawyer of several accused in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases in South Africa, Jan Wagena, is said to be the last person in possession of dockets related to some African National Congress party leaders. This was revealed by the former SAPS detective Andrew Leeks at the TRC cases inquiry in Newtown, Johannesburg. Leeks told evidence leader and counsel for the victims' families, Howard Vani, that he got this information during a march in 2004 meeting with the former police commissioner Johan van der Merwe.
General has clearly stated that he has conducted an investigation and has obtained documents and statements implicating members of the ANC with regard to the so-called TRC cases. Further, that these documents have been handed to the attorney Wagner, who is still in possession thereof.
And then you end off the statement by saying...
General van der Merwe has undertaken to confirm this in a sworn statement which he will prepare himself.
Earlier testimony had alleged that Wagner prompted the November 2004 instruction from then Minister Bridget Mabandla stopping the arrest of the accused in the attempted murder of anti-apartheid activist Frank Chikane. Lastly, a BBC investigation has revealed that Nepal's top police officer gave the order allowing the use of live fire during last year's Gen Z protests in the capital, Kathmandu. It was triggered by a social media ban, the BBC's Sabina Shretra.
The BBC examined more than 4,000 videos and photos taken on the 8th of September last year, the day tens of thousands of young people took to the streets of the capital Kathmandu to protest against government corruption. Internal police documents leaked to the World Service revealed that permission to use live ammunition was given by the Inspector General of Police, Chandrakubir Kapung. Nepal police told the BBC that the order had already been cleared by a government security committee. 19 people were killed that day.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Bafana will play Panama in 2 friendly matches in the build-up to the FIFA World Cup, while the SA Open is officially sold out. Details at 7:30.
Wherever the hour finds you, across the world, here's your morning African lens on the world's leading story. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
7 minutes past 7 Central African time. A very good morning to you, and thank you for joining us for this, the second hour of Rise and Shine, the Thursday edition with me, Peter Ndoro, and Asanda Beda. And we've got quite a lot that we're still unpacking in this hour, and we'll talk about that just now. But a quick reminder that we're streaming live on the internet. channelafrica.co.za is where you can find us, and also you can catch us on your mobile phones. Just go to your app store, look for SABC Plus, that's SABC Plus, and then look for Channel Africa and Rise and Shine, of course. And we're also on your social media platforms, so just type in Channel Africa and you will find us there as well, so you can listen and watch radio nowadays. Asanda, good morning.
These days, technology, we're moving very fast towards, I think we're already there, AI.
Yes, exactly, absolutely.
And we just have to catch up.
So the question is Peter Ndoro actually here?
We wonder. We wonder, hey? Very good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for staying with us as Rise and Shine. One of the stories we're looking at in this hour, I'll be going to Rwanda. 6 years after the death of Rwandan gospel singer and peace advocate Kizito Mihigo in police custody, questions have persisted over accountability and freedom of expression in Rwanda. So authorities had they say of what happened. They say that Mihigo took his own life, but human rights groups were insisting that there's been no credible independent investigation into his death. So they are wanting to know what actually happened. So Human Rights Watch has stepped into this issue and they're lending their voice. We'll be speaking to senior Great Lakes researcher at Human Rights Watch about that story. Some cold cases don't remain cold forever.
No, and technology catches up with a lot of those cold cases, actually, because there was not enough science back in the day for some of these cases.
Right.
And fast forward 10, 15 years, suddenly you've got new ways of investigating and these cases come back.
Interesting one. So we're going there.
Yeah.
Where else
All
are
right.
we going?
And we're going to East Africa this hour as well. A Zimbabwean human rights lawyer and civil rights activist, Brian Kagoro, was expelled from Kenya on Monday. The government accusing him of aiding and abetting or working with foreign agents to cause dissent or political unrest in Kenya. A lot of people are surprised and shocked because he's quite well known across the continent. He spent many years in Kenya. So reaction is been of surprise that the Kenyan authorities would do this. And we'll be unpacking from the Regional Lawyers Association what on earth is going on. Has this a lot to do with the forthcoming elections? We'll find out this hour.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has informed UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that South Africa will withdraw its troop contribution to MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, after nearly 27 years of involvement. Defense expert Dean Wingren, what are the main security implications of South Africa withdrawing troops from MONUSCO, and why now?
South Africa has been part of the MONUSCO mission since it was established in 1999 and is South Africa's longest running peacekeeping and peace enforcement mission. So it's not something to be taken lightly when the President says that he's unilaterally withdrawing from the mission. Why now is the question. Well, the MONUSCO mission has always been intended to be terminated initially at the end of 2025, and then it was extended to the end of this year. So with the funding crisis within the UN generally, there's less funds for these peacekeeping missions, and hence the UN has had to cut back on the various contributing countries and equipment.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
6 years after the death of Rwandan gospel singer and peace advocate Kizito Mihigo in police custody, questions persist over accountability and freedom of expression in Rwanda. While authorities say Mihigo took his own life, human rights groups insist there has been no credible independent investigation into his death. At the same time, critics of the government, including blogger Mabel Karasira, remain imprisoned under laws governing genocide ideology and divisionism. To discuss what Mihigo's case reveals about the broader human rights climate in Rwanda and the implications of free speech and judicial independence, we're joined now by Clementine de Montioye, senior Great Lakes researcher at Human Rights Watch. Clementine, good morning and thank you for making time to talk to us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. 6 years on, what still stands out to you about the circumstances surrounding Kizito Mihigo's death, and why do human rights groups continue to raise concerns about accountability on this case?
So Kizito's case was a really important one in Rwanda. It really sent shockwaves through Rwandan society. Kizito was a well-loved activist and gospel singer He was a genocide survivor who spoke a lot about reconciliation and forgiveness. And his problems began in 2014 when he released a song in which he expressed compassion for victims of the genocide, but also victims of revenge killings. And that was seen as a reference to killings by the RPF that took place in 1994. He was disappeared, held incommunicado for 9 days, threatened by government officials, and forced to confess to crimes that he was later charged with. He was jailed for 4 years, and after his release, he told us he was still very much under surveillance, and he was worried for his security. He had been pardoned in 2018, but for 2 years he was struggling to live freely. And just before his death, he told us that he was being pressured into giving false testimony against political opponents, and he wanted to flee the country. He was arrested at the border as he was trying to flee the country, and 4 days later, Rwandan authorities announced that he had committed suicide in his cell. There's many reasons to question this narrative. The authorities really tried to push forward this narrative according to which he was depressed and that he had strangled himself. But ultimately, he was in police custody, and that means the authorities were responsible for his life and his safety, and have to conduct a credible, independent investigation. That never happened. But what we saw was that after his death in 2020, the authorities in Rwanda led a crackdown on freedom of expression that led to a number of political opponents, bloggers, and journalists being jailed. Throughout 2021, 2022, there were a number of arrests that were made of people, including people that used YouTube as a platform to criticize the government. And that's where Aimable Karasira fell in the crosshairs of the government and was arrested in April 2021.
In that case then of Aimable Karasira, what does his prosecution tell us about how Rwanda applies laws? They call it divisionism and genocide ideology today.
Yeah, so Karasira is a genocide survivor as well, and someone who has spoken publicly about the fact that some of his relatives were killed by Hutu extremists during the genocide, but he's also said that his mother had been killed in '94 by the RPF because she had witnessed their crimes. He was arrested and charged, as you said, with divisionism, genocide denial, justification of the genocide. And for us, this really highlights that while these laws on genocide ideology may have been intended to prevent and punish hate speech of the kind that led to the genocide in '94, in fact, they've been used to restrict free speech and impose very strict limits on how people can talk about the events of '94. And for us, Aimable's case illustrates the extent to which these broad laws can be manipulated to silence those who wish to talk about the RPF's crimes in the aftermath of the genocide. The issue with Karasira's case is also that he was convicted in September last year of incitement to divisionism, and by now he'll have almost finished his 5-year sentence because he was arrested in 2021. However, the prosecution has appealed the conviction and is asking for a 30-year sentence against him, which would be really devastating for Karasira.
Mehigo, he was himself a genocide survivor, and he spoke out about forgiveness and reconciliation, going again towards the questions around why he would be declared somebody who was depressed and therefore takes his own life via strangulation. But why do you think that voices like his are seen as threatening by the authorities, especially if he's preaching forgiveness and reconciliation?
Well, that's a question you should ask the Rwandan authorities, really. But I think the at least when Mihigo was in prison in 2016, he sent us a recording in which he explained that following the song's release, he was repeatedly threatened and summoned by senior government officials and told to ask for forgiveness. He was, even President Kagame said in a public speech at one point something along the lines that I'm not a singer, but I could never sing in praise of those who wish Rwanda harm. So the way Kizito explained his incommunicado detention to us and the way that his trial was carried out very much indicated that his song was seen as almost an attack on Rwanda, and that he needed to ask for forgiveness for it.
Clementine, we're going to leave it there for now. And one wonders, if we look ahead, what risks still are there in Rwanda when it comes to freedom of expression if cases like these, Karasira's being an example, continue unabated? But thank you for your time. We are out of time for this chat.
Thank you very much.
Clementine de Montjoye is Senior Great Lakes Researcher at Human Rights Watch.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So let's move to this story now that takes us to East Africa. Kenya has expelled Zimbabwean lawyer and prominent civic activist Brian Kagoro, accusing him of involvement in what authorities are describing as a foreign-backed attempt to incite political unrest. Now, the government has linked him to activist networks allegedly funded from abroad, though no public evidence has actually been presented supporting this allegation. The move comes at a time of heightened political tension in Kenya, including recent youth-led protests and growing scrutiny of civil society organizations across the region. Well, to unpack the legal, constitutional, and perhaps broader continental implications, we're now joined by Don Dea, who's a Kenyan advocate, Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and also the chair of the International Coalition for the Responsibility to Protect. And he joins us from Arusha and has worked alongside Brian Kagoro for nearly 3 decades. Thank you very much indeed, Don, for joining us, and welcome to the program.
And thank you for having me.
I guess, Brian is more than just a colleague. This is someone that you have known well for a long, long time. How's he holding up? This must have come as a shock to him.
Yes, we do know that our governments, or those that rule over us, are changing and are becoming more brazen across the continent and in significant parts of Eastern Africa. But this still came as a shock to Brian and to us. But apart from that, he's holding on very well. He's in one of his homes. He's safe and sound, and he's continuing with his work unperturbed. So we're in touch all the time, and I know that he is well.
So, the claims are that he was linked to foreign funding of activist networks. Is there any evidence that's been presented by the authorities to support these claims at all?
No evidence has been presented by the authorities. In fact, the authorities have not formally addressed this matter. What they have done is release a press article to the gutter press and to the lower press to begin being published there. So no government official has addressed this issue in any formal manner in public. And of course, there'll be no evidence. I have, as many people do, Brian is a public figure whose life is lived in the open, and he publishes on social media whatever he's doing at every point in time. There would be no possibility of evidence being found of him engaging in any activity that would be unlawful or subversive. So this was just like a bolt out of the blue. And I think a signal from those that rule Kenya now that they want to follow the Museveni doctrine of destroying civil society in the run-up to an election.
Take us through the events that led up to his arrest, and then what happened after that?
Brian arrived routinely. I mean, Brian is somebody who has lived in Kenya a lot due to the nature of his work for the last 20 years, and he does have family and a home in Kenya. So on Sunday afternoon at about 4 o'clock, Brian arrives from Johannesburg on a routine flight. He goes through immigration, his passport is stamped, and he begins walking towards getting his luggage. Then the immigration officer runs back and says, sorry, I stamped this thing by mistake. Can you please come back for a moment? And he comes back and they take his passport and they put him on a bench to sit on a bench to wait. And then that begins a 14-hour ordeal in which he's just sitting there, and then he's moved to a separate room, and then he's told he's going to be interrogated, and then his phones and gadgets are taken away. And then eventually the National Intelligence Service comes and they carry out some intensive interrogation. At one point, it's one person, then 2 people, then 7 people, and they keep on going in and out. And they keep him for 14 hours till Monday morning at about 7 o'clock. When they inform him that we're putting you on a plane to go back where you came from, which was Johannesburg. And that is how he left the country. So apart from the initial stamp that allowed him to enter the country, there's no document, there's no stamp on his passport or so on, officially declaring persona non grata. He was not allowed to access us. We had colleagues, even at the airport, we had a lawyer and so on. He was not allowed to talk to his family or to his lawyers or to his friends, and they were not allowed to access him. So he was held incommunicado, interviewed without assistance, and then ejected from the country without any formal documentation showing why he's being evicted from the country. So that really is what we're dealing with. It's informality.
Was he able to share with you what kind of questions they were asking him for so long?
Yes, they were asking him inane questions whose answers they know as an intelligence service and whose answers anywhere easily available, even on Google. Like, who are you? Why are you always coming here? Do you have a house here? Where is your spouse? What does your spouse do? Do you know the Gen Z of Kenya? Have you trained them? And so on. So really, there was no solid question that would indicate that this is a problem they have with him. They were very general questions.
So I've been speaking to a number of Kenyans, and they've been telling me that things have never been this bad. Is the crackdown that you're seeing quite severe? I mean, we've seen youth protesting, and I guess always before elections in Kenya, it is a tense time generally, but there seems to be an escalation, according to the Kenyans I've spoken to.
Yes, I wouldn't say exactly that things have never been this bad. We lived through the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s when there was much more repression and much less global awareness or Pan-African awareness. So I wouldn't say that they've never been this bad. Part of the benefit of living in the 21st century is access to the internet and social media. So even Pan-Africanists across the continent and in a diaspora are able to express more solidarity with each other. But yes, things are getting very dire. And in my view, this is the government or sections of the government beginning to send an early signal as to how repressive they would like to be in the run-up to our next presidential and general elections in Kenya, which are going to be in August of next year, 2027. So we see an increasing amount of repression of activists and even of the political opposition. We see intimidation of the media in Kenya and the regional media. And we see Kenya giving itself a new reputation as the abduction capital of Eastern Africa, so that those who are speaking out, activists from South Sudan, from Uganda, from Tanzania, and so on, who happen to have sought refuge in Kenya, Kenya having had a previous reputation as a safe haven for Pan-Africanists who are engaging in lawful activism. Now we see unlawful abductions, we see extraordinary renditions of people, some of whom have ended up dead or ended up in sham trials, or ended up, like in the case of South Sudan, being thrown into, unlawful detention centers run by the intelligence. So it's a new reputation that Kenya is earning for itself. And I think those that govern over the country and the citizens really have to worry whether that's the reputation that they want. Kenya having been for long one of the nodes for Pan-African dialogue and gathering, not just on human rights issues, but even for economic issues, digital issues, the digital economy, and so on.
Has Brian given an indication of what he wants to do next? Challenge this perhaps legally, or what does it mean? Can he go back to Kenya?
We are engaging in consultations on that with Brian and with lots of other friends, including friends in the Kenyan government. So we will definitely engage and confront the Kenyan government on this, because as a country that has to, take responsibility for a number of the Pan-African ventures that we're engaging with. President William Ruto himself, having been appointed by his colleagues to be champion on a number of things, including on reform of the African Union, we cannot have Kenya as a place where Pan-Africanists cannot come. So we will definitely engage. We're talking with Brian, we're talking with other colleagues, we'll confront the Kenyan government, and either they will be able to guarantee free entry, free movement for Pan-Africanists, or we call for their withdrawal from championing anything Pan-Africanism or anything at the African Union.
Don, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very, very much indeed for that update. Thanks for your time.
You're welcome, and have a good day.
That's Don Dea, who's a Kenyan advocate and CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Union based in Arusha, and a close colleague of Brian Kagoro, telling us about his ordeals. And now that he's an expelled person at this time, but they are engaging with the authorities. It's 7:30. It's time for your news headlines. Here's Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Kenya has expelled Zimbabwean lawyer and civic activist Brian Kagoro, accusing him of involvement in a foreign-backed plot to stir political unrest. South Africa's Parliament's ad hoc committee says that it is looking into concerns of national security as it meets again today with two returning witnesses. Today, private forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan will return to the committee. And Pope Leo will visit 4 countries across Africa from the 13th to the 23rd of April, with the pontiff making his first major overseas trip in 2026 to the continent where the Catholic Church is growing the fastest. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of sports. We get the latest from Musibudi Makura now.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. A very good morning from the sports desk. So South Africa will host Panama in 2 international friendly matches next month. This as part of their preparations for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The match is set for Durban's Moses Mabhida Stadium on the 27th of March in the country's KwaZulu-Natal province before the teams meet again at the Cape Town Stadium. That's on the 31st of March in the Western Cape province. The head coach Hugo Bruce views the fixtures as vital to his build-up program ahead of the global showpiece in the USA, Canada and Mexico. It will mark Bafana Bafana's return to Durban for the very first time since their goalless draw with Zimbabwe in October, a qualifier that preceded their emphatic 3-0 victory over Rwanda, this to secure qualification to the World Cup. Now, Vinicius Jr. struck the winner as Real Madrid sealed their place in the UEFA Champions League last 16 with a 2-1 victory over Benfica at the Santiago Bernabeu last night. Now, the Brazilian forward, supported by a known racism banner from home fans after the recent controversy, drove home a clinical finish with 10 minutes remaining to wrap up a 3-1 aggregate win. Now, despite missing the injured Kylian Mbappe, Madrid held firm with Vinicius continuing his rich vein of form, 6 goals and 5 games now to send Los Blancos through to face either Manchester City or Sporting Lisbon in the next round. Meanwhile, in another match played last night, Atalanta produced one of the greatest Champions League comebacks, overturning a 2-0 deficit in the first leg to beat Borussia Dortmund 4-1 in Bergamo and reach the last 16. Now they will face either Arsenal or Bayern Munich in the next round of the UEFA Champions League. Defending champions India will face a must-win T20 World Cup Super 8 clash against Zimbabwe in Chennai today, with their faltering opening combination under scrutiny. Wicketkeeper batter Sanju Samson is being considered as a potential option at the top of the order after Ashbhishek Sharma's slump, which includes 3 consecutive ducks. Now, India's campaign took a heavy blow with a 76 runs defeat to South Africa over the weekend in their opening Super 8 match, leaving them needing victories in their remaining fixtures to keep their semi-final hopes alive. Now, New Zealand boosted their T20 World Cup semi-final hopes with a commanding 6-1 win over the co-host Sri Lanka in Colombo yesterday, knocking the island nation out of this year's tournament. So chasing 169, Sri Lanka faltered at 107 for 8 as the Black Caps tightened their grip on qualification. Now, victory over England on Friday will then see New Zealand top the Super 8 group and then progress alongside Harry Brooks' team. Meanwhile, South African batter Tristan Stubbs expects the West Indies to bring a similar challenge to the way they faced against the co-host India when the two teams meet in the second Super 8 match of the T20 World Cup today. So the two teams will meet at the Narendra Modi Stadium in the city of Ahmedabad, with that play starting at 11:30 a.m. Central African time. Both teams, by the way, are undefeated so far at this year's tournament.
We even saw in the series now they're posting massive scores and all the batters are in really good form. So they bring that challenge with a bowling attack that's doing really well. So I think completely it's different to India, but I suppose in a way it's a similar challenge, like a really good batting lineup who can score that big score if you're not on it, and a bowling attack that then can do a good job at defending.
And finally, in golf news, the 115th Investec South African Open Championship has officially been sold out, with organisers confirming no tickets will be available online or at the gate. Now, the Sunshine Tour, as well as the DP World Tour co-sanctioned event, tees off in Stellenbosch in South Africa's Western Cape province today, promising one of the most significant additions in the tournament's proud history. So with exemptions into the Masters as well as the Open, a star-studded field featuring major winners, including Ryder Cup as well as President's Cup players, and a revamped Stellenbosch Golf Club course, fans will witness a true celebration of South African golf. For 5-time champion Ernie Els, the week represents everything special about the National Open. The time has just gone, so actually just a few seconds to go until 7 a.m. Central African Time. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. I'm back with the final sports update on Africa Rise and Shine in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
7:37 Central African Time. Coming up shortly, the business news. But before that, I take you back in history one more time. Egypt and Israel exchange ambassadors, and this was significant and landmark moment, actually, because particularly in Middle Eastern and North African diplomacy, Egypt and Israel exchanged ambassadors formally for the very first time, February the 26th, 1980. And this followed the 1979 peace treaty, making Egypt the first Arab nation to establish full diplomatic relations with Israel, a move that led to Egypt's temporary suspension from the Arab League. And that's still a bone of contention, actually, to this day. Stay with us, the business news is next.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le diamant rouge et Bina l'export depuis le Cameroun, le pays des lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Download the SABC app and take Channel Africa with you everywhere you go.
Okay, let's catch you up now with the world of business and at the desk this morning. Good morning to you, Winkler Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning and a very good morning to our listeners. Our top story this hour, Zambia has pushed back on part of a deal worth more than $1 billion in global health aid from the United States because it does not align with the country's interests. The Zambian government said this yesterday as health advocates warned that the deal links the money to mining access and has data sharing risks. The deal governs more than $1 billion of U.S. funding to tackle conditions like HIV and malaria, as well as improve disease outbreak preparedness and maternal child health over the next 5 years. It also requires around $340 million in co-financing from the Zambian government over the same period. The deal was due to be signed in November, but had been delayed after revised drafts included a problematic section. Appetite from institutional investors has made an oversubscribed initial public offering in Kenya's state oil pipeline firm. This is according to the lead advisor for the transaction, countering reports of investor apathy. In the sale that ran from the 19th of January to the 24th of February, the government offered a 65% stake in Kenya Pipeline Company to raise $825.3 million in what would be East Africa's biggest ever IPO in local currency terms. Analysts in South Africa have welcomed the 2026 national budget's stance on protecting the local financial system from criminal syndicates. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tabled the 2026 budget in Parliament in Cape Town yesterday. Godongwana says tighter enforcement and regulatory cooperation is needed in the fight against the illicit economy as part of the broader fiscal sustainability strategy. Anti-money laundering compliance officer at KPMG South Africa, Lebogang Tobokhale, says stronger compliance measures will help protect government revenue.
The right financial regulatory focus and sustainability in collectively curbing financial crimes, these efforts by the National Treasury maintain a macro stability and aims for an even-aimed economic growth. Over no tax shocks, obviously.
Meanwhile, Kodongwana announced an increase in tobacco and alcohol excise duties in line with inflation. The sin taxes are placed on non-essential items to discourage excessive alcohol and tobacco consumption, while also generating additional revenue for the government. Kodongwana says this includes excise duties on electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems.
As a result, a tax of 20 pack of cigarettes rises from 22 Rand 81 to 23.58. Pipe tobacco rises by 28 cents per 25 grams and cigarettes tobacco by 87 cents per 50 grams. The excise on alcohol beverage also rises by inflation. As such, a 340 milliliter can of beer or cider increases by 8 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine goes by 15 cents. A 750 million bottle of spirits will increase by 320.
The Bank of Korea's 7-member Monetary Policy Board voted to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 2.5% today, signaling that policy would stay unchanged for the next 6 months as a chip boom in exports and steady inflation allow policymakers more time to assess financial stability risks. The central bank also raised this year's growth forecast to 2% from 1.8% previously. The central bank says it sees Asia's fourth largest economy growing significantly faster this year than in 2025, helped by the chip boom led by Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. And now taking a look at the indicators this morning, $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,351 naira. In Botswana, it's 13.3. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 7. And in Zambia, it's 18 kwacha 81. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 rial 14. Russia, 76 rubles 73. In India, it's 90 rupees 91. China, 6 yuan 87, and South Africa $1 is trading at 15 rand 89 cents this morning. It's strengthened quite a bit from yesterday morning. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 84 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,182, platinum at $2,271 per ounce, also slightly higher, while Brent crude oil is at $70.87 a barrel. And that's your business news. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For the Channel Africa Business Desk, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
US President Donald Trump delivered a marathon State of the Union address to a joint sitting of Congress on Tuesday night, touting a nation that was back, bigger, richer and stronger than ever before. Referring to his 1 year in office as a turnaround for the ages, it's a message that has struggled to resonate with the majority of Americans who view the president's record in office unfavorably. Americans who view the president's record in office say this in the midst of persistent affordability crisis and an immigration crackdown that has seen communities disrupted and Americans killed, with mass protests erupting across the country. Sherwin Bryce-Pease reports on one of the biggest nights in politics, in which the US president hoping to shift the dynamics ahead of the midterm election in November.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
With his approval poll numbers tanking, Trump delivered the longest State of the Union in history.
beating his own record set last year for a drawn-out speech focused largely on what Republicans view as a record of progress since he took office just over a year ago.
When I last spoke in this chamber 12 months ago, I had just inherited a nation in crisis with a stagnant economy, inflation at record levels, a wide-open border, horrendous recruitment for military and police, rampant crime at home, and wars and chaos all over the world. But tonight, after just 1 year, I can say with dignity and pride that we have achieved a transformation like no one has ever seen before, and a turnaround for the ages. It is indeed a turnaround for the ages.
A portrayal that collides with the views of most Americans who remain anxious about an affordability crisis. Just days after the Supreme Court dealt a seismic blow to the president's economic agenda, that many argue is partly responsible for Americans being hit in the pocket.
Just 4 days ago, an unfortunate ruling from the United States Supreme Court. It just came down. It came down. Very unfortunate ruling. But the good news is that almost all countries and corporations want to keep the deal that they already made, right, Scott? Knowing that the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal could be far worse for them, and therefore they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement.
A joint sitting that will be remembered for heckling. Trump asked lawmakers to stand if they agreed that the first duty of the American government was to protect American citizens and not undocumented immigrants, leading to this exchange after Democrats remained in their seats.
You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Representative Ilhan Omar shouting back, "You're the murderer, you should be ashamed," after 2 Americans were killed in January while protesting immigration tactics in Minnesota. While Representative Al Green was ejected from the chamber after holding up a sign that read, "Black people aren't apes." Trump also boasted about the military's illegal takedown of Venezuela's ousted president Nicolas Maduro, calling that country a new friend and partner. He pointed to his efforts to bring peace to conflicts around the world, including in Gaza, and then on Iran. This, amid growing concern of an imminent military escalation.
They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Dozens of Democratic lawmakers boycotted the speech, many joining a counter-rally near the Capitol, while their response to President Trump was delivered by the newly elected governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger.
He lied, he scapegoated, and he distracted. And he offered no real solutions to our nation's pressing challenges, so many of which he is actively making worse. He tries to divide us. He tries to enrage us, to pit us against one another, neighbor against neighbor. And sometimes he succeeds. And so you have to ask, who benefits from his rhetoric, his policies, his actions, the short list of laws he's pushed through this Republican Congress? Somebody must be benefiting. He's enriching himself, his family, his friends. The scale of the corruption is unprecedented.
The president made no mention of the Epstein files, despite a number of survivors attending the joint sitting as guests of Democrats, an issue that will likely play itself out in this election cycle. So, in many ways, the State of the Union was the launch of what promises to be an intense year of electioneering and campaigning to determine which party takes control of both houses of Congress. With just 8 months to go until November, expect the political rhetoric only to intensify. I'm Sherman Bryce-Pease in New York.
A new report from the Food and Agriculture Organization or FAO of the United Nations, the International Land Coalition or ILC, and the French Agricultural Research and Cooperation Organization, CIRAD, shows that 35% of land worldwide has formal documentation. Millions of people, particularly in Africa, live with insecure land rights, while customary lands, often rich in biodiversity and carbon storage, remain largely unrecognized. To help us understand the challenges and the opportunities for secure and inclusive land governance, we're joined live now by Adriano Campolina, Senior Policy Officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, joining us in Rome. Adriano, thank you for joining us. Good morning to you.
Thank you very much and good morning.
Thanks for making time to chat to us. Let's start on this point that we make then in our introduction. 35% of land worldwide is formally documented, and that's a short or small number according to this report. Why is it so hard to secure land tenure globally?
There are many challenges that really are at place. The first one is that we do have legal gaps and a weak recognition of legitimate rights. In many cases, the state do not recognize the ownership and management rights of customary communities, despite a de facto role in managing these territories. There's also high cost and complexity of formalization, the cost of surveying, registration, documentation, and the reality that many cities are not conceived to register overlapping group rights at scale. There's limited existing data and documentation, resulting in overlapping claims, which sometimes fuels disputes and discourages long-term investment, and rising external pressures on land, urban expansion, industrial agricultural expansion, extractive industries, which intensify competition and dispossession risks where rights aren't documented and protected.
So as a result of all these factors you mentioned, then land remains unrecognized, especially customary land. So how does that or this uncertainty affect efforts to fight climate change and efforts to protect biodiversity?
It does affect quite intensely. Of the 42% of lands worldwide under customary tenure, nearly half are unrecognized by states. At the same time, these territories are extremely rich on biodiversity. This legal limbo leaves areas with more than a third of stored carbon and close to 40% of intact forests at risk. Socioeconomic risks linked to food insecurity, population growth, irrigation stress, urban expansion, and water scarcity are especially acute in the customary lands in Africa. The surge in climate mitigation and conservation initiatives aiming to protect ecosystems and address climate change is also placed intense pressure on customary lands, especially those that lack formal recognition or protections. Recent mega deals, such as the ones by UAE-based blue carbon in Kenya, Zimbabwe, Liberia, and Tanzania involve claims to vast carbon rights, including to 1/5 of Zimbabwe's land, for example. So the pressures are really big on those lands.
And then there are inequalities that persist in land ownership between women and men. So what is the impact of that inequality when it comes to food security as well as people's livelihoods around the world?
When land is concentrated in the hands of a few, especially in the context where non-farm job creation is very slow and rural poverty is persistent, it can lead to unsustainable social and economic outcomes. Limited access to land reduces women's employment opportunities and decision-making power over family and community affairs, while increase the unpaid work, further reinforcing gender inequality. It's a kind of a cycle of exclusion. Gender gaps are widespread. Men are more likely than women to own or have secure rights to land in almost all countries with data, and the gap exceeds 20 percentage points in nearly half. Data on concentration of agricultural land shows that the top 10% of the largest landholdings operate 89% of agricultural land, highlighting the unequal distribution. In fact, using indicators that investigate further inequalities based on the distribution of agricultural land rights and land quality, in many countries reveal even starker inequalities.
Let's go back to the issue of customary land or customary systems. If we focus on the African continent, most land is under this system of customary law with little formal recognition. So what does this mean for governance generally?
as you said, in sub-Saharan Africa, 73% of land is held under customary tenure, but only 1% is formally recognized as such, with much of the rest undocumented and treated as under state ownership. This creates predictable governance and rural development problems. We have first administrative blind spots. If rights are not recorded or recognized, the planning, service delivery, taxation, land use, regulation are harder to be done in a fair and transparent manner. Disputes and elite capture risks is another factor. Unclear authority and documentation makes it easier for powerful actors to appropriate land, increasing conflict and transaction insecurity. Investment and livelihood insecurity is another problem. Households hesitate to invest in soil, trees, irrigation, or long-term improvement if land claims can be challenged. And finally, you have the gender exclusion being amplified, where customary norms and statutory systems interact in ways that limit women's secure claims.
So what are the practical steps then that we'll need to take to make sure that land rights are more secure and inclusive in Africa? Because we're going to need this land for agriculture and urban growth.
Definitely, we do need that, and for the food security within Africa and around the globe. So the first one is to make land governance more effective, and therefore building the enabling environment that's required. One that moves beyond technocratic top-down approach and supports inclusive rights-based governance. Most stakeholder land governance systems at country level can enhance participatory policy making, monitor implementation, in all jurisdictions, and evaluate the impact of land governance and rights on food security, sustainable development, gender equality, and peace. Strong governance frameworks, community participation, and mechanisms to address power imbalances are crucial for protecting land rights and resources. Creating those robust legal and institutional structures ensures inclusive decision-making processes and actively mitigating power imbalances. And this is necessary to address the inequalities that we are looking at. We also have to address the various pressures on securing land rights, align with the principles of the Fortuny guidelines on the governance of tenure, which are with some measures such as follows: legal recognition and protection of customary and collective tenure, not just treating it as state land, with clear procedures for community land governance and protection against dispossession, systematic participatory mapping and recording of customary territories with fit-for-purpose approach, so rights are visible to the state, investors, and communities themselves. Gender responsive tenure reforms and implementation, ensuring that women's rights are recognized in law and registered and recorded in practice, with accessible dispute mechanisms, transparent land governance and safeguards for land-based investments, public disclosure, consultation, free prior investment, and informed consent where relevant, grievance pathways, oversight to prevent corruption and land grabbing, integrate tenure into climate and biodiversity programming, and finally, better monitoring and accountability.
Adriano, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much again for your valuable insights.
Thank you very much and have a nice day.
You too. Adriano Campolina is Senior Policy Officer at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, joining us there in Rome, sharing insights on the challenges and opportunities for secure land tenure around the world.
Right, it's 8 o'clock, which means it's time for the final hour of the program you affectionately know and love, Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda. Here's the news with Onel Nsinsi. Good morning.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Peter. Kenya has expelled Zimbabwean lawyer and civic activist Brian Kagoro, accusing him of involvement in a foreign-backed plot to stop political unrest. Authorities say he was linked to activist networks allegedly funded from abroad, though no public evidence have been provided. Kenyan advocate, CEO of the Pan-African Lawyers Union and chair of the International Coalition for the Responsibility to Protect, and based in Arusha, Don Dea explains.
This still came as a shock to Brian and to us. No evidence has been presented by the authorities. In fact, the authorities have not formally addressed this matter. What they have done is release a press article to the gutter press and to the lower press to begin being published there. So no government official has addressed this issue in any formal manner. There would be no possibility of evidence being found of him engaging in any activity that would be unlawful or subversive.
South Africa's Parliament's ad hoc committee in Cape Town is looking into concerns of national security and is meeting today with 2 returning witnesses. The committee is probing allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system of the country. Today, private forensic investigator Paul O'Sullivan will return to the committee. He appeared earlier this month, but due to his severe back pain, his questioning was cut short. The former acting National Police Commissioner Khomotso Phahlane is finalizing his testimony before the committee. He appeared in January this year, but due to time constraints, the committee couldn't finalize its questioning. Former state attorney and lawyer for several accused in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases in South Africa, Jan Wagner, is said to be the last person in possession of the dockets related to some African National Congress party leaders. This was revealed by the former SAPS detective Andrew Lisk at the TRC cases inquiry in Newtown, Johannesburg. Lisk told evidence leaders and counsel for the victims' families, Howard Varney, that he got this information during a March 2004 meeting with the former police commissioner, Johan van der Merwe.
General has clearly stated that he has conducted an investigation and has obtained documents and statements implicating members of the ANC with regard to the so-called TRC cases. Further, that these documents have been handed to the attorney Wagner, who is still in possession thereof.
And then you end off the statement by saying...
General van der Merwe has undertaken to confirm this in a sworn statement which he will prepare himself.
Pope Leo will visit 4 countries across Africa from the 13th to the 23rd of April, with the point of making his first major overseas trip in 2026 to the continent where the Catholic Church is growing fastest. The Pope will also make a one-day visit on the 28th of March to Monaco. In Africa, Leo will visit Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea and Cameroon. According to Vatican statistics, about 20% of the world's Catholics live on the continent. And lastly, a BBC investigation has revealed that Nepal's top police officer gave the order allowing the use of live fire during last year's Gen Z protests in the capital, Kathmandu. It was triggered by a social media ban. The BBC's Sabina Shrestha.
The BBC examined more than 4,000 videos and photos taken on the 8th of September last year, the day tens of thousands of young people took to the streets of the capital Kathmandu to protest against government corruption. Internal police documents leaked to the World Service revealed that permission to use live ammunition was given by the Inspector General of Police, Chandrakubir Kapung. Nepal police told the BBC that the order had already been cleared by a government security committee. 19 people were killed that day.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Morocco named WAFCON preliminary squad while the Asia Open is officially sold out. Details coming up at 8:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It is Rise and Shine, the third and final hour thereof. Thank you for staying with us as Channel Africa, from the African perspective, bringing you news and current affairs on this particular show, hosted by Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro. You can connect with us on channelafrica.co.za. That's our website. Find us live streaming on YouTube at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. That same handle goes across our various social media platforms, where we invite you to connect with us with your questions and comments. You can also find us on DSTV Audio Bouquet Channel 802. We're also on the SABC Plus app via mobile phone. So we welcome you whichever way you choose to connect. One of the stories we'll be looking at in this hour is Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who's arrived in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, on Tuesday. This on a state visit to Ethiopia this week. The visit is aimed at strengthening bilateral ties, and the visit comes days after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proposed forging a network of allied nations, including in the Middle East and Africa. Questions remain about who forms part of that network that he's called Hexagon of Alliances. On Sunday, he said they will include Israel, India, Greece and Cyprus and others to stand against their enemies in the Middle East. We get analysis from senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection on that. And then bringing it back to South Africa.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, the
chat.
budget. I mean, it's the biggest budget on the continent in terms of what a finance minister presents. And it's been interesting, the reaction that people have been given. They've been saying, a lot of opposition politicians saying that it was boring. Well, you know what? I don't think finance budgets should be exciting at all, actually, personally. The usual suspects, cigarettes and alcohol, got punished, but no new taxes for individuals, it seems. We'll be unpacking that this hour.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you'll be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
So, South Africa's National Treasury has outlined plans to increase spending on social development over the next 3 years, raising the allocation to 466.4 billion rand, and that's approximately $29 billion by the 2028-29 financial year. Now, the additional funding is aimed at strengthening social grants, welfare services and poverty relief programs, whilst also supporting initiatives focused on women, children, young people, the elderly and persons with disabilities. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana outlined the allocations during his budget speech in Parliament yesterday. Corbin August reports.
The old age grant, disability grant and care dependency grant are expected to increase. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says all these grants are expected to increase by 3.7%, while the child support grant is expected to increase from 560 Rand to 580 Rand.
Social grants are allocated 292.8 billion rand, enabling the following increases. The old age grant, disability grant and care dependence grants rise by 80 Rand in April 2026 to 2,400. The same applies to the War Veterans Grant, which increases by 80 Rand to 2,420.
Godongwana also announced several other proposed social grant increases.
The foster care grant goes up from 1.2 in April, a 40 rand increase, and to 1,300 in October, a 10 rand increase. Child support grant and grant in aid grant increased by 20 rand.
Godongwana says the social relief of distress grant will continue in its current form for the year ahead. I'm Corbin August in Cape Town.
Right, so that was Corbin August in Cape Town, giving us some background to the Finance Minister's report and budget, where I suppose his announcements, an increase in fuel levies in line with inflation. Godongwana delivered this budget and in the Western Cape province also announced an increase in tobacco and alcohol excise duties. The tax on a 20-pack of cigarettes will now increase from 22 Rand 81 cents and 23 Rand 58 cents, whilst the cost of cigars will rise by 4 Rand 56 cents per 23 grams. Well, let's make sense of all of that, actually. And to help us is Dr. Peter Bauer, who's an economist at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me today.
So the opposition has said that the budget was boring. And I've got to be honest, as a taxpayer, I love boring. What's your take on the minister's budget?
Thank you. I see it as shall we say, a system stabilization budget, also administration stabilization, as well as in terms of aligning its objectives with the address by President Cyril Ramaphosa in the State of the Nation. So key concerns that were raised in the State of the Nation, such as, dealing with issues such as crime and security, as well as, disaster relief. These were all issues raised at the State of the Nation. So, but overall, in terms of the changes adjusting the social income, shall we say, the social grant system, protecting households, that was definitely raised, again, addressing and also supporting State of a Nation address. Overall, in terms of, shall we say, reducing our budget deficit, in other words, the difference between government spending and revenue, we're showing signs of like stabilizing and also at the same time sort of reducing that budget deficit. And also he focused on some of the issues around the role of our SARS and being able to, through basically commending SARS for its ability to collect additional taxes, which then was able to support the fact that we don't need to increase additional taxes on the consumers, which may be also seen as somewhat of a relief in the economy.
Say perhaps a move towards fiscal stability. Some might say he's just managing short-term pressures, but that's a debate that will be had. I am curious, government projects that borrowing will decline over the medium term, yet debt service costs will remain above 430 billion next year. Is the current pace of consolidation, in your view, enough to stabilize debt sustainability?
Yes, I think we're taking active steps towards managing our debt is definitely in line with our, shall we say, our credit ratings, and also sort of supporting our credit ratings. We're also supporting South Africa's, shall we say, fiscal, shall we say, policy, as well as our financial institution stability. He is emphasizing that financial market stability in South Africa, which is exactly what the kind of information we need to send to our foreign investors for South Africa. So yes, sitting at around 76% debt to GDP is a major concern. We're losing a lot of money in debt repayments, especially in the interest component of those debt repayments. And that is monies that could have been spent, for example, for the economy overall. So in essence, we're looking at sending a very positive message out there, making sure that we're providing the right kind of information to our foreign investors and also for our credit rating agencies to keep our position now that we've been removed from the grey listing. And also, I think very much about, shall we say, by consolidating debt as well and putting the message out there, hey, listen, we're very serious about our debt. It also adds additional security to the stabilizing rand. I mean, the rand we already seen has been improving against both the euro and the US dollar. In terms of, again, highlighting the fact that the economy is on a growth trajectory, economically growth, they're estimating some positive increases over the next 3 years. And that will also then support our, shall we say, our financial position internationally. So commitment towards debt repayment is definitely significant and very, very important.
So no increases on personal income tax or VAT, but I do get a feeling that he's playing card tricks with us because whilst he hasn't done that, he has increased the fuel levy. And what it means, of course, for me, if I'm taking a taxi to work and home every single day, chances are my taxi prices are going to go up. So more people are actually going to contribute tax-wise indirectly through fuel levies. So it appears as if he hasn't increased tax for us, but he has really, hasn't he?
Well, in terms of the fuel levy, I mean, yes, that is definitely, a popular term to use would be the low-hanging fruit. It's an inefficient tax that we could collect. However, it is definitely going to have an impact on both our household consumption, consumer sort of income distribution. Commuters need to get to work, and transport is critical in the economy. But to counter that as well, he also he's putting investments aside and policy aside towards supporting the public transport system and the transport infrastructure. So on the one side, he's saying, yes, we're focusing on, additional taxes that affect households and of course businesses. And yes, that's definitely going to help assist at least generating additional revenue. And of course, if we've got economic growth thrown in, and if the economy continues to grow, if we're able to reduce unemployment, those kind of taxes are going to increase. But there's that support for the infrastructural development as well, and looking at public transport and supporting the public transport as well as the shall we say, the transport infrastructure. South Africa is definitely caught a little bit between a rock and a hard place. Limited number of taxpayers, large and growing population, very high levels of unemployment, and the persistent challenges of poverty and inequality in the economy, and we need to address those. So overall, he's looking at trying to, shall we say, on the one side, support that social grant, support initiatives towards trying to reduce the poverty inequality argument. But he's also then, shall we say, trying to raise those additional taxes through obviously the fuel levies. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned the infamous sin taxes, if we're going to refer to those, additional taxes from alcohol and cigarettes. And of course the excise on that. But the key idea here is again about stabilization. So yes, that additional fuel levy could have implications towards additional costs for households and businesses. So there could be an inflationary element coming through in that element. But then also again, I think if we continue to support that infrastructural development, I think that infrastructural stabilization, as I was mentioning earlier, I think is really a significant contribution. So he's dealing both sides of the coin at the same time.
Right, and very briefly then, looking back at all of it and what we've just shared, do you think he's done the best he could?
I think in terms of stabilizing the economy, yes. Obviously, there would be additional elements I would like to have seen addressed in this budget speech, additional support for tertiary institutions. But he's focusing on a really key, important area, and that is your primary care and your early child development. And that is as incredibly powerful, which is supporting many households in South Africa headed by women. And so supporting, shall we say, early child development, and then indirectly also supporting women-headed households and child development. So primary education, focusing also towards healthcare. He's already listed certain healthcare facilities and a certain, shall we say, in Mpumalanga, a key tertiary institution they wish to develop. But in this case, I think it is a very cautious approach going forward. We need more economic growth to be able to generate sufficient income to be able to invest more significantly into the economy. And on the same time, we also need to make sure we have a stable economy, and we need additional fiscal stimulus to try and create that economic growth. And given the limited tax base, and also trying to prevent us and maintain the fact that we would maintain going into additional debt, are all key stabilization factors. So yes, we need the economic growth. We are putting additional spending into appropriate sectors of our economy, especially sort of, so to say, young development and protecting our economy by not trying to increase, for example, the kind of taxes that would impact the most vulnerable, such as those living in poverty or the low-income households.
To Peter Bauer, I wish we could have talked for longer, but time not on our side. But thank you very much indeed for your insights on the budget.
Thank you.
That's Dr. Peter Bauer, economist at the University of Johannesburg, unpacking the budget that was delivered by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana yesterday.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog arrived in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, on Tuesday on a state visit this week to strengthen bilateral ties. The visit comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proposed forging a network of allied nations, including in the Middle East and Africa, to stand against what he called radical adversaries. It is not yet known which Arab and African countries will form part of Netanyahu's hypothetical hexagon of alliances, which he said on Sunday will include Israel, India, Greece, Cyprus, and others to stand against their enemies in the Middle East. However, Ethiopian President Taye Atske-Selassie said Ethiopia consistently supports the two-state solution, where Israelis and Palestinians live side by side in peace, as he hosted Herzog for talks. To unpack this further, Naeem Jina, senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, joins us now. Naeem, thank you for making time for us this morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you, Asanda?
Good, thanks as well. So firstly, what do you make of the timing of this visit by Herzog, especially following Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's proposed forging of a network of allied nations that would include the Middle East and Africa to stand against what he has termed radical adversaries?
Yes, I mean, the two things are linked. Clearly, Herzog's visit follows that and is part of Israel's effort to shore up some kind of an alliance. But it also comes in the wake of the genocide in Gaza and the world reaction against that. I mean, you're finding that in various countries of the world, soldiers who served in the Israeli occupation forces in Gaza are actively being sought, being denied entry into places like restaurants, hotels, etc. And Israel is currently feeling under a great amount of stress. Its economy is suffering, and it needs to build some kind of an alliance. So that on the one hand. On the other hand, Israel sees itself becoming more isolated in the region. It's not just Iran which is positioned against it, but more recently, its hopes of normalizing relations with Saudi Arabia, for example, have gone down the drain. Saudi Arabia is getting closer to Turkey, has a deal with Pakistan, etc. So this Ethiopian move, as well as the visit by the Indian Prime Minister Modi to Israel, I think fits within that kind of context.
What do you understand about this hexagon of alliances? Can you explain what that is and how Ethiopia could fit into Prime Minister Netanyahu's proposed network of allies that he says should counter regional adversaries like Iran?
Well, the hexagon is 6 sides, so I'm not sure why Netanyahu wants to restrict himself to only. Maybe they're only able to pull together 6 partners. I don't know, no. So Ethiopia is important for a few reasons. I mean, geostrategic mostly. So we're not talking about great economic relations between them. Relations have been somewhat up and down, although mostly up in the recent past. Ethiopia has supported Israel's attempt to be an observer state at the African Union, which battle it kind of lost. But most recently, in December, we know that Israel granted recognition to Somaliland as a state, the only state in the world to have done so. And of course, the African Union was very upset about that. The African Union is headquartered in Ethiopia, but also from an Ethiopian perspective, having access to Somaliland can be very useful because Ethiopia is landlocked. Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister, has expressed a desire to get access to the sea. And working with Israel to get Somaliland to grant that access could be useful. So there's that particular kind of angle from the Ethiopian side. From the Israeli side, the need to build strong alliances on Africa clearly as part of that hexagon idea, but more broadly, as it's losing allies to build alliances in Africa. And then, Ethiopia, of course, is a useful choice. Ethiopia, South Sudan, for example, because of the kind of conflicts with other states that Israel is not too pleased with. In the case of Ethiopia, Ethiopia has a long-running battle with Egypt and Sudan around the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. So Ethiopia can gain from this, so that's how it's being promoted. Israel, geostrategically, supporting Somaliland, getting Ethiopia's support for Somaliland, potentially getting Ethiopia to also recognize Somaliland as a state, together with Israel's other big ally, which is the United Arab Emirates. The UAE already has a base or controls the port in Somaliland, as well as several other ports in the area, and that can grant an Israel-UAE alliance, which would be, I think, the core of this hexagon or whatever it will be, kind of very strategic and critical access and control over the entrance to the Red Sea.
On the other hand, given the strained relations between Somalia and Ethiopia, and then earlier this year, Somaliland being recognized as a sovereign state by Israel, do you think that this is a strategic move for Israel, specifically targeting the Horn of Africa?
Yeah, no. So exactly as I said, I mean the fact that Somalia and Ethiopia have very bad relations is into Israel's objectives. But the Horn is critical. I mean, the Horn is critical because of its access to the sea, its potential control over the Red Sea. And the UAE, as I said, Israel's partner, has attempted to do this on both sides of the Red Sea. So gain control in Somaliland. It also has other bases, Djibouti, etc. But on the other side, it wanted to create a separation in Yemen, supporting the Southern Transitional Council, which was a separatist organization, separate the south of Yemen from the rest of Yemen, install one of its proxies there, and then control both sides of the Red Sea. That objective, of course, was defeated when Saudi Arabia bombed the ship and basically got rid of UAE forces. But that's the objective of the UAE-Israel alliance, and so Ethiopia fits into that Horn of Africa project very well.
Naeem, thank you so much. It's always great catching up with you on these types of topics. We appreciate your time again.
Thank you, Asanda. Bye.
Naeem Gina is a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, giving us his analysis on Israeli President Isaac Herzog's visit to Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa. This on Tuesday. He arrived there, and the visit to strengthen bilateral ties. Let's get our news headlines now. It's 8:31 Central African Time. Good morning, Onele.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Kenya has expelled Zimbabwean lawyer and civic activist Brian Kagoro, accusing him of involvement in a foreign-backed plot to stir political unrest. The United States and Burkina Faso have signed a 5-year bilateral health cooperation memorandum of understanding aimed at strengthening regional health security and improving the African nation's ability to prevent the spread of infectious diseases. The British government has insisted it is not pausing the process of transferring sovereignty of the Chagos Island to Mauritius, despite the minister announcing that it was. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
A final look at what's been happening in the world of sport right here on Rise and Shine. And with the bulletin is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Good morning once again from the Sports Desk. Indeed, for the final time on Africa Rise and Shine, we'll start with the story. So Captain Ghislaine Chebak will lead an experienced Moroccan team for the 2026 Total Energies CAF Africa Cup of Nations tournament, while talented youngster Katuza Azrav will join the senior national team for the very first time. This comes after a 32 preliminary player squad was named to begin preparations for the competition, which will take place in the country Morocco from the 17th of March to the 3rd of April. The head coach Jorge Vilda Rodriguez unveiled his selection ahead of a training camp that starts later this week at the Mohammed V football complex in Maroma as the Atlas Lionesses step up their build-up to the continental showpiece. Now, the squad combines experienced internationals, returning players, as well as emerging talents, reflecting Morocco's ambition to mount a very strong challenge on home soil. Among those recalled are Yazin Mrabat, Salma Ani, as well as Sana Mawozdi, while Barcelona 18-year-old forward Azraf has also earned her first senior call-up after impressing at youth level. For the field now, Chelsea as well as West Ham United have been fined $365,000 and $35,000 respectively following a mass confrontation between players during their Premier League meeting at Stamford Bridge in January. So the incident erupted in added time after João Pedro had reacted to a shove on Marc Cucurella, sparking ugly scenes that ended with West Ham United's Jean-Claire Todibo being sent off for grabbing Pedro by the neck. Now, the Football Association also said both clubs admitted charges of failing to control their players, with an independent commission noting previous breaches of Rule E 20.1 of imposing the fines. Well, South African spinner Keshav Maharaj has assured the team have quickly shifted focus to today's Crunch Super 8 fixture against the West Indies in the ICC T20 World Cup in Ahmedabad. South Africa are now just one win away from sealing their place in the semi-finals after an emphatic 76-run victory over the co-hosts as well as the defending champions India on Sunday. However, Maharaj knows the importance of not getting carried away and says they will not take the West Indies for granted.
Yeah, I think coming back after the win against India, there was a real sort of energy and buzz to our camp. I mean, you beat probably the best side in the competition if you look at it. But we're not getting carried away at that. We still know that there's a lot of cricket to be played in this tournament. So, dusting ourselves off and, doing things that we can do better from that game and focusing on the positives and keep building. Like I said, West Indies is a very strong side, a very dangerous side. So not to be taken for granted at any stage. But, yeah, just focusing on what we can do really well and adapting very quickly.
Meanwhile, co-host Sri Lanka bowed out of the T20 World Cup with a 61-run defeat to New Zealand in Colombo, undone by the late batting surge as well as a ruthless bowling display. After reducing the Black Caps to 96 for 6, Sri Lanka's attack crumbled as Mitchell Santner as well as Cole McConey blasted 70 runs in the final 4 hours final overs to set the target of 169 runs. Now the chase quickly unravelled with Matt Henry striking twice in a power play and then Rachin Ravindra then starring with 4 for 27 as the host limped to 107 for 8. Now Sri Lanka's campaign ends with back-to-back Super 8 defeats while New Zealand remain in contention for a 5th semi-final appearance, needing a victory over England on Friday to officially seal their place. And finally, the 115th Investec South African Open Championship has officially sold out, with organisers confirming no tickets will be available online or at the gate. Now, the Sunshine Tour as well as the DP World Tour sanctioned events tease off in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape province today and promising one of the most significant additions in the tournament's proud history. With exemptions into the Masters as well as the Open, a star-studded field featuring major winners, Ryder Cup as well as President's Cup players, and a revamped Stellenbosch golf course, fans will witness a true celebration of South African golf. For 5-time champion Ernie Els, this week also represents everything special about the National Open. While the tournament will tee off at officially 10 a.m. Central African time this morning. 8:37 a.m. Central African time, and that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or call us. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Coming up, we look at Guinea's military that has confirmed that the detention of 16 Sierra Leonean soldiers has happened after accusing them of crossing the border on Sunday and raising their flag on Ghanaian soil. That story coming up on Rise and Shine.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Historia msikilizaji ya Valentine Day au siku ya wapendanao ilianzia katika nyakati za kale za dola la Roma. Watafiti wengi wa historia wanaamini kuwa siku hii inahusishwa na sherehe za kipagani zilizokuwa zikifanyika kila mwaka katikati ya mwezi Februari. Msikilizaji, sherehe hizo zilijulikana kama Lupercalia na zilifanyika kuadhimisha uzazi, upendo na mwanzo wa majira ya kuchipua. Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Call us on +27 63 406 9126 and contribute to the conversation.
Time now to get a business update, and here's Bontle Headbush with our economics news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning. Our top business story this hour: Zambia has pushed back on part of a deal worth more than $1 billion in global health aid from the United States because it does not align with the country's interests. The Zambian government said this yesterday as health advocates warned that the deal links the money to mining access and has data sharing risks. The deal governs more than $1 billion of U.S. funding to tackle conditions like HIV and malaria, as well as improve disease outbreak preparedness and maternal and child health over the next 5 years. It also requires around $340 million in co-financing from the Zambian government over the same period. The deal was due to be signed in November, but had been delayed after revised drafts included a problematic section. Appetite from institutional investors has made for an oversubscribed initial public offering in Kenya's state oil pipeline firm. This is according to the lead advisor for the transaction, countering reports of investor apathy. In the sale that ran from the 19th of January to the 24th of February, the government offered a 65% stake in Kenya Pipeline Company to raise $825.31 million in what would be East Africa's biggest ever IPO in local currency terms. Analysts in South Africa have welcomed the 2026 national budget stance on protecting the local financial system from criminal syndicates. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana tabled the 2026 budget in Parliament in Cape Town yesterday. Godongwana says tighter enforcement and regulatory cooperation is needed in the fight against the illicit economy as part of the broader fiscal sustainability strategy. Anti-money laundering compliance officer at KPMG South Africa, Lebogang Tubakhale, says stronger compliance measures will help protect government revenue.
The right financial regulatory focus and sustainability in collectively curbing financial crimes, these efforts by the National Treasury maintain a macro stability and aims for an even-aimed economic growth. Over no tax shocks, obviously.
Meanwhile, Godongwana announced an increase in tobacco and alcohol excise duties in line with inflation. The sin taxes are placed on non-essential items to discourage excessive alcohol and tobacco consumption, while also generating additional revenue for the government. Godongwana says this includes excise duties on electronic nicotine and non-nicotine delivery systems.
As a result, a tax of 20 pack of cigarettes rises from 22 Rand 81 to 23.58. Pipe tobacco rises by 28 cents per 25 grams and cigarettes tobacco by 87 cents per 50 grams. The excise on alcohol beverage also rises by inflation. As such, a 340 milliliter can of beer or cider increases by 8 cents. A 750 milliliter bottle of wine goes by 15 cents. A 750 million bottle of spirits will increase by 320.
The Bank of Korea's 7-member Monetary Policy Board voted to keep its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 2.5% today, signaling that policy would stay unchanged for the next 6 months as a chip boom in exports and steady inflation allow policymakers more time to assess financial stability risks. The central bank also raised this year's growth forecast to 2% from 1.8% previously. The central bank says it sees Asia's fourth largest economy growing significantly faster this year than in 2025, helped by a chip boom led by Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. And now taking a look at the indicators. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,351 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13.3. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling and 7. And in Zambia, it's at 18 kwacha 81. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 Real 14. Russia, 76 rubles 73. In India, it's 90 rupees 91. China, 6 yuan 87. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 15 Rand 89 cents this morning. $1 trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 84 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,182 per ounce, platinum $2,271 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $70.87 a barrel. And that's the business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any stories you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The Vatican has announced that Pope Leo will visit 4 countries across Africa from April the 13th to the 23rd, with the pontiff making his first major overseas trip in 2026 to the continent where the Catholic Church is growing the fastest. Now, the Africa trip will be preceded by a one-day visit next month on the 28th to Monaco, the microstate on the French Riviera, and then wind up in Spain in early June. Tutongobeni has more.
In his first visit to Africa, Pope Leo will visit Algeria, Angola, Equatorial Guinea, and Cameroon, where he is expected to draw large crowds, urge world leaders to support development on the continent, and highlight efforts at Catholic-Muslim dialogue. Leo, elected in May to succeed the late Pope Francis as head of the 1.4 billion member church, has only made one overseas trip so far, visiting Turkey and Lebanon in November and December on a visit originally organized for the late Pope Francis. Vatican officials and African church leaders say the upcoming papal tour in Africa is a sign of the priority the church places on the continent. According to Vatican statistics, about 20% of the world's Catholics live on the continent. The last papal trip to Africa was in 2023 when Francis visited the Democratic Republic of Congo and South Sudan. Pope Benedict XVI was the last pontiff to visit Angola and Cameroon in 2009. John Paul II was the last pope to visit Equatorial Guinea in 1982. Algeria, an overwhelmingly Muslim country with a few thousand Catholics among its population of some 47 million people, has never hosted a papal visit before. Leo, a member of the Augustinian religious order, has a special interest in visiting the country. The Pope is also expected in 2026 to visit Peru, where he previously served as a missionary and bishop for decades. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongobeni in Johannesburg.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Guinea's military has confirmed the detention of 16 Sierra Leonean soldiers after accusing them of crossing the border on Sunday and raising their flag on Guinean soil. The 2 West African countries have been involved in a border dispute for more than 2 decades, stemming from the Sierra Leonean Civil War between 1991 and 2002. Sierra Leone's government had invited Guinea to help defend its eastern borders during the war, but the Guinean troops didn't completely withdraw after the war. Lebogang Mabange has more.
The dispute happened near Kudaya in Guinea's Ferrana prefecture along the border with Sierra Leone. Guinea's army says 16 Sierra Leonean soldiers crossed into its territory without authorization, set up a tent and raised their national flag. The troops were detained, their equipment confiscated, and they were handed over to judicial police for investigation. But Sierra Leone disputes that account. Authorities say their forces were in the border town of Kaliere in Falaba district, constructing a border post when Guinean troops allegedly crossed into the area. During the confrontation, several Sierra Leonean security personnel were detained and taken across the border. Freetown says it is now using diplomatic and security channels to secure their safe release, while a fact-finding mission has been sent to establish what exactly happened. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
So, coming up after Rise and Shine is On the Move here on Channel Africa. To tell us what to expect on this Thursday's edition is Balesa. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hello, Miss P.
Well, today in the first hour of the show, we're going to be speaking about solo dates. It's also one of my favorite things to do. I know Ben is also really into solo dates because we think like going out and, you know, going to grab, whether it's a bite or just something nice, has to do with like either romance or friendship or meeting other people.
Yeah.
But you can just do it on your own.
That is interesting. What makes it a date, though?
It makes it a date because you say it is.
Okay.
Right? You're
All
taking
right.
yourself out. It's the intention, right?
Okay.
It's not like, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat. It's the intention. It doesn't always have to be food.
Okay.
It can be, out to a drawing, doing something, artsy. It's the intention. If you
That's
call it a date,
interesting.
it's a date.
Okay.
So what exactly are you talking about? What's
We're going to see
the
how
angle?
it actually makes sure that, you're carving enough time for yourself.
great.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
self-care,
about that
self-love.
self-care,
With the
making
wife
sure
and
there's
children,
intentional time
But that's
for
exactly
you.
why you need it. Get out of
Yeah.
the house and
Yeah.
leave the wife and
And that's
children.
also why your wife needs it on her own.
I date with sleep.
And you can do that. You can book yourself in a hotel overnight and
Really?
get proper sleep. That's
Yes.
another date for yourself.
Yeah.
I like the idea of that one.
We're also going to be chatting in the second hour of the show about the scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
And it's something that's so prevalent amongst African people. It has a lot to do with our history.
Yeah.
But how do you break free from the scarcity mindset and start making choices from a place where you know things are enough?
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a really good one.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
that's coming up then. Hosted by Palesa Tao and Benjamin Mushatama is on the move, so stay tuned for that.
Ritmos e Cultura. Com Jacob Tivani.
Meus ouvintes do Ritmos e Cultura, hoje em linha com uma das grandezas da música moçambicana, porque não? Ele que é um dos kings da marrabenta, uma bermuda in the building.
É um prazer enorme estar a fazer parte deste programa. Deixe-me só saudar. Boa tarde a todos os ouvintes que me ouvem neste preciso momento. Meu nome é Uma Bermuda, de Alau Fanelo Estarapo, Gajo Aguda Anhela Mabiscato. Eu vou saudar de uma maneira diferente. Ah, tita buia, mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ah, tita buia, mwanango, tiduma tifika giane. Ani motive lo ababa yena otiva mina haikonama. Ani motive lo anona yena otiva wahimbo watwa. Cá estou eu, irmão, para conversarmos, para falarmos um pouco de tudo. Estou aqui, estou aberto. Eu estou muito feliz porque é a primeira vez que eu falo nesta rádio, falo para os ouvintes, então estou muito feliz.
Ritmos e Cultura com Jacob Tivani. Todos os domingos, das 20 às 21 horas.
From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Today's Thursday, which means we're going to be uploading the latest edition of the Channel Africa Conversation podcast. And following the arrival of 100 US soldiers into Nigeria to train and advise the West African nation's armed forces on intelligence in their battle against growing security threats from Islamist militants and other armed groups, the challenges are complex and drawing increasing international attention. Well, in part one of this week's episode, I spoke to Reverend Ezekiel Beda Dachomo, who's a pastor and human rights advocate in Nigeria's Plateau State, and he shares the experiences of people on the ground there. And I've got to tell you, this is quite a story that you don't want to miss.
When they arrive here, village, they will be chanting Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. What has Allahu Akbar to do with starting a crisis if it is not religion? The first shout you hear in a community, almost all the communities, you will hear Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The next thing you see sporadic shooting, gunshots all over in the village, chanting Allahu Akbar.
All right, so please don't miss that conversation. Really, really important. That was part one. There's also a part two where I speak to other analysts. But let's move on to another story now, the next one, which is this conversation. In fast-moving African markets, perception often moves faster than press releases. A leadership decision taken in a boardroom today can be debated on WhatsApp groups, radio talk shows, and social media within hours. Yet many organizations still treat communication as something that happens after strategy is finalized. Well, to help us understand why that approach can be risky, we're now joined by Leila Bastati, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at the APO Group. That's one of Africa's leading communications consultancies, and she advises global and African leaders on how to communicate effectively across complex and diverse markets. Leila, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much for having me.
Leila, you've argued that in many African markets, communication begins the moment a decision is made, not when it's announced. Why do so many leaders, do you think, underestimate how quickly narratives start forming?
I think that the most common mistake that they do in Africa specifically, it is definitely treating the continent as one market, and also not bringing, as you were saying, communications into decision making from the start. So on the first point, obviously, the continent has 54 distinct environments. You have different languages, different operating systems, different ways of doing business, different media ecosystems. And at APO Group, we see this constantly, whether it is working with fintech companies expanding or supporting major events, major continental events like the International Olympic Committee, Youth Olympic Games in Dakar, or African Energy Week. The pattern is very, very clear. What works in Kenya does not work in Nigeria. What works in South Africa does not necessarily resonate in Egypt. And so if you get this wrong, even the best decision can land as a backlash. And on the second point, in Africa, communications moves really, really fast, and much faster than what international companies are used to. And if you don't think how the decision will be received when you are creating it, then you've already failed. And so as you quoted me, say my advice is always bring communication into the boardroom, and not just to write statements, but really to shape the decisions, because communications shouldn't be something that you do after. It has to be part of the decision itself. And I think it's
I guess there's a lot of corporations beyond our continent that don't think that Africa is as advanced and socially tech clever as the rest of the world, and that we're really up there and moving quite quickly with it.
Very much so. And it's a shift that I'm seeing coming, though. You are seeing more and more companies, African born and bred companies, taking charge of their narrative. And so finally, you see this shift whereby the story of Africa is no longer told by journalists or media outside of Africa, but is taken care of by its own journalists.
And perhaps briefly, if you had to give one clear piece of advice to CEOs operating in African markets today, particularly in an era of economic uncertainty and digital acceleration, what mindset shift should they adopt about communication and leadership?
I might sound like a broken record, but the biggest advice for me would be really stop thinking that communication happens after you've made the decision. The leaders and the companies that we see succeeding is that the ones that are treating communications like what I like to call decision insurance. So they design decisions that account for how they will land, before they are finalized. So they truly bring communications expertise into the room while decisions are being made. And another important point is that they need to rely to partners that understand the nuances. Because in those markets where communications move fast and misinterpretation sometimes is the way that things happen, you really don't want to buy an insurance after your house is already on fire.
We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but great advice. Thank you so much indeed. I think we need to talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
That's Leila Bastati, Chief Commercial Officer at APO Group, sharing her thoughts on the need for communications to be something that is strategic and not an afterthought.
We'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye from us for now.
Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Good morning, it's 9 a.m. Central Africa time. Time for On the Move with myself, Palisa Dau, and Benjamin Moshatama. But first, let's get our latest news.
SABC News.